Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Village of Mount Pleasant Plan Commission meeting for March 19th, 2025. Roll call, please.
Mayor,
Here.
Rizzler,
Here.
Van Beckham,
Here.
Washburn,
Here.
Bhatia,
Here.
Driver.
Here. Next on the agenda, I would ask if we could move the Parks and Recreation Manager, George Baumgart, up to the front. Any problems with that?
issues.
No issues?
No problem.
Okay.
No problem.
George, come on up and...
All right, thank you. This is just our first quarter report, so I'm just going to touch on a few things very briefly. Our reservations and registrations for the 2025 season started in January. Right now, we are about 50% of the registration that we've had thus far for our park and rec programs compared to last year. And we're just under 50% for the amount of reservations we had for 25 with only 2 months into the season. So we're on a very good pace. One thing of note, our Parks and Recreation Building Community Room, we've already hit half of the reservation numbers that we had last year, again, in this short of amount of time. So that building is continuously getting booked about 75 to 80% of the weekends in every month. So we're very happy with that. We are working on our neighborhood parks plan. For those that need a refresher, that's covering James Turek, Dirksey, Drozd, and Pheasant Creek. So we have been working with MSA on developing our final concepts, which we hope to present coming up in April, May. We're still working on that timeline to finalize that. Our urban forestry grant RFP has been out. So we received that $25,000 grant for urban forestry. So we put out an RFP for tree inventory and urban forestry management plan. So those will be due in April 4th. So we'll hopefully be getting that started here towards the end of April. We'll begin our spring startup, which includes opening up the bathrooms. Pickleball net's going to be put back up here in the beginning of April. We're hiring our parks seasonal staff, so we just recently posted that position. And then we got a couple of special events upcoming. We've got our Cottontail Trail, which will be held here on March 29th. And then we are going to be doing our first ever Arbor Day celebration on April 26th. So that's tied into our urban forestry grant and our pursuing of Tree City USA. So we're happy that we're going to, more details to follow on that, but that's going to be taking place on April 26th. And then the final note, I attended the WPRA conference where, for those who may not know, Campus Park was awarded the design award for across the state. So for projects over $3.5 million. So I was able to go accept an award on behalf of the village. So it's nice to be recognized by the state for our great parks. So
Congratulations.
Yes.
thank you. So, and that is my very brief report for this quarter, because I know we got a lot on the agenda here. So, but I'll take any questions.
Any questions for George?
No, not at this time.
Well done. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
well done.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. All right, next on the agenda will be under new business, South Green Bay Road zoning map amendment ZMA 25-2. I'm sorry. Next on the agenda will be approval of the February 19th, 2025 meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve February 19, 2025 minutes of the meeting with one correction. Under the roll call is mentioned that the Commissioner Van Beckham was absent. We normally use the term was excused, not absent. I'd like to be corrected.
So noted.
Second.
Motion a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we will move on to South Green Bay Road zoning map amendment ZMA 25-2. Robin.
Okay, am I on? Yeah, I'm on. Okay, so I'll kind of clarify how we're going to approach these from kind of a discussion standpoint, because there are several different items and aspects of them. So how this is going to go is we're going to we're gonna discuss the zoning map amendment. I'm gonna give my presentation. We're gonna invite the applicant to, present their presentation. Then we can talk about the zoning map amendment. Then we'll proceed to the preliminary plat application, in which a part of which there is an exception request. Basically, I will go over the instructions for that request. We'll have the applicant again come forward and present their basically request for the exception, and then I can come back and we'll basically go through the staff observation on that. Then you will have an opportunity, depending on whether or not you agree with the exception or not, to add amendments to the approval, whether or not to place any additional conditions on the item or not. The recommendation as is assuming an approval of that, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Any questions on that?
And there will be time for public comment. We will make time for that.
Okay. So as far as the zoning map amendment, Primestone Residential applied to amend the zoning map for 34.28 acres between Old Green Bay Road and Royal Oaks Drive from AG1 to RL1. That's residential low density 1. This application is concurrent with a preliminary plat application, PSP 25-1, that divides the parcel into 103 lots. The village board previously denied zoning map amendment application ZMA-24-9 on October 28, 2024. Because that application requested to rezone portions of the parcel to RM1, which is residential moderate density 1. And this application is with a preliminary plat application that zones the property only to RL1. The application is able to be considered within a period of 1 year per 90-530.90 successive applications. So, and that is what that is. So basically the main differences between this particular application and the other ones, we're going to focus solely on the zoning standpoint, is that this application only has RL1 zoning. So any lot on there would only be limited to 1 or 2 family dwellings, as well as lots can range between 6,000 square feet and 1 acre. With widths from 55 feet to 120 feet. So it's a pretty broad range, but this zoning basically encapsulates almost 70% of the zoning of homes in Mount Pleasant. It's a big portion of the lands around Mount Pleasant, as well as the majority of the land around the actual parcel itself. The only exceptions were to be a couple of parcels along Old Green Bay Road are zoned estate lot residential RE. RE is a less dense zoning classification, but that is basically a hybrid between the agricultural designation and the residential one. It has larger lot minimums, larger home size minimums, and also gives agricultural rights. So you could have a rooster on an RE lot. You could have some farm animals depending on the acreage of the lot. Currently under an RL zoning, the only farm animals are 4 hens that are allowed under our hen ordinance. So that's just a general kind of explanation of those particular zones. RE is generally used for lots that are outside the sewer service area or use well water or just very large lots. So those are the explanations for that. So as far as the comp plan and the local planning area, this is recommended for residential. It has been that way for quite some time. The park and open and space plan doesn't identify any acreage within the subject parcel for permanent public connections through permanent public ownership or any parts like that. You'll notice on the preliminary plat application is that there have been some lands that are dedicated. We'll get to that on the preliminary plat application. From the process of just that this meets the residential portion of the comp plan, and for the zoning, that meets that. Okay, so, and our fiscal analysis is also with the the preliminary site plan. So this map amendment and subsequent development would support the village's goals reported through findings in our housing affordability analysis, including increasing supply to address the village's low vacancy rates and increasing housing options. Application relates only to the property's zoning. The land division will be in that preliminary plat. So several of the developer will talk about some of the changes from the previous iterations of this plan and the zoning, but overall the unit count has been reduced pretty significantly from the first iteration of this plan over a year ago. So with that, I'll take any questions about the zoning portion of this right now and then hand it over to the developer.
Any questions regarding the zoning portion of this?
The wetlands will be addressed in the plat part of your discussion? Okay.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I guess my main, let's see, I had one question in particular. When you were just talking about the estate zoning and so forth, you were just speaking to those as reference, right?
Yes.
To the other zoning categories. You had mentioned it on page 5 of 8 of your analysis again, and I kind of questioned why it was even in there, but is that just to further explain that at this point, RL1 is about as low as we can go?
Yeah, so it used to be back in you would know this more than anybody, but in the ye old times, subdivisions could be platted at like RE specs, but like as far as basically half-acre lots, 2/3 acre lots, stuff like that.
No.
But you don't see that anymore, so.
No, that's okay. I just,
Yeah.
that was my only question. You were just putting it in there as a clarification that we've gone as low as we can go. That,
Yes.
you know. Then
Previous-
the other things, Robin, is just to keep this moving forward, because I that's all I wanted to know. When we're looking at the application being able to be considered under section 90.53.90, you know, basically that section, I guess for the village board, should this go through and go to village board, I would really like the village attorney to speak to this somehow, because I understand that the code, and it says that unless the village board has acted to deny the previous application without prejudice, which we did not, that was not the way we denied it, or the new application is substantially different than the one that was denied. My interpretation of this is that when we denied it, we denied the RL1 and the RM1. The whole zoning application was denied. So I guess I just simply would like to make sure as a trustee that I'm interpreting our code properly, if I'm to move this forward, that because they've simply removed the RM1, does that meet the definition of substantially different?
Yeah, so, another thing, they also asked for RL2 zoning in the last one that was denied in October, which basically has a maximum lot size of 9,600 square feet and a maximum lot width of 80. There were quite a bit of those particular zones, only the ones that actually bordered the eastern and southern borders were RL1. The rest was a combination of RL2 and RM1. And a significant portion of it was RM1, which was the 4 to 6 unit townhome style stuff. So it is a judgment call. You know, we can certainly talk to legal about that, but with the conversion of requesting an entirely lower category of zoning for the whole property, and the fact that that was like the last rung that you could go, we felt that that was substantially different.
Okay. Again, my Chairman, I would like to have that opinion for the village board,
Okay.
just for clarification.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I agree with trustee Washburn. I think it doesn't hurt to have the opinion so that everything is clear, so that there's no room for any other interpretation. Although I will not be at the village board meeting on Monday, but I think it's without any big effort, it should be clear. I have a couple of questions, Robin. Number one, we all know that, okay, say this application for the zoning is concurrent with a preliminary plat application PSP-25-1, which is the next item on the agenda, that divide the parcel into 3 lots, into 103 lots. On the other hand, on page 8 of this package, I think it's a typo, but I want to be again on the record and clarify. On page 8 of it, it says PSP-24-1 must also be approved and recorded for the zoning map amendment to take effect. Is that a typo? Because PSP 24-1, we rejected that.
Yes, so that is a typo from, this is
wanted to-
25-1 and that was 24-1.
Yeah, okay.
I must have missed that with my
No.
control F.
Again, I don't want anyone legally saying,
Oh, no,
that
that
has
one,
to be.
that one's dead and
and,
gone.
and for the zoning, I have one more question. Consistency with the comprehensive plan and the local planning area, one of the paragraphs is, the village staff, to balance all the concern, that the village staff recommend balancing these two competing recommendation through the subdivision plating process by requiring naturalized stormwater detention, all okay, protecting the wetland area. Now, here's my question. Protecting the wetland areas adjacent to James Turek Park through landowner dedication. On the other hand, our process does though, in lieu of the landowner dedication, we could have a fee. So how do we protect that? How do we make sure that down the road, the village will not say, we don't want the
Okay.
dedication, we'll charge you the fees.
That's a great question. So basically, our Parks and Open Space Plan, that was done by, Sam and George with some help of, some consultants and stuff like that, established several different park sites. Those park sites are the official ones, and when you dedicate land to the village that adds or completes those recommended park sites, then that is the primary use for the in lieu of fee, as you're talking about. For everybody else, there's such thing as a park impact fee, where you pay a particular set of money per unit or per lot that you have in an application, and that goes to maintaining and establishing neighborhood parks. If you instead donate land that is identified in our Parks and Open Space Plan, then you can basically be credited for that land instead of that fee at the rate that the land is assessed at. However, this particular portion of land, and then there's a lot of it that's said basically sort of reserved for Parks and Open Space Plan. It is not in that plan. So the village has an option, and that will be negotiated between the village board and the developer if and when they would accept any of that. This process basically establishes that we don't take just random land that a developer doesn't want and doesn't want to maintain, and we actually take useful land that we've identified as, a great addition to our public park system. So I think, does that answer your question?
No, I do, I appreciate that, I understand. The reason I ask is that in the context of this development application, the previous discussions were also about the dedication of the land to protect the wetland. So I am thinking in the future with respect to this zoning and this plat to ensure that we pursue that path of the land dedication instead of the fee. I do understand it will be down the road negotiation, but I don't know how to protect that.
Oh, the area that kind of has been identified that for the Root Pike Wind plan, as well as the stuff that's adjacent to James Turek Park, none of that has ever been been developed in any of these iterations of plans. That always has been basically the wetland area or an outlot. It's as you get further away, the only two wetlands that are actually disturbed are very minor wetlands that would be filled using a DNR fill permit, which is allowed for areas under an acre, I believe. I'm not super proficient on that. So That is definitely something that we can talk about, and since they propose to dedicate that entire area that you're talking about, that would be up to you guys in the village board.
Okay, thank you.
Robin, go ahead, Tom.
Since you two have introduced the concept of the dedication of land in this park area, I just want to ask, based upon your notes, you know, this option exists for the village to take land for park purposes in lieu of park monies for park.
Mhm.
This seems like the perfect candidate to do that. You have a park right there on the edge of the, if ever you're going to do this, why isn't this a time to do it? To take parkland when it's adjoining an existing park?
I agree. What I am identifying is that it's not necessarily called out in our Parks and Open Space plan. So any kind of adjustment to that plan or an accepting of anything outside of that plan will have to be done at the village board level.
But are you going to be recommending that? Because we have a preliminary plat coming to us, which does not show any parkland being created or dedicated, correct?
On the preliminary plat, it says open space to be dedicated for public park purposes is on there. We have flagged that as that is something that is in flux and not necessarily guaranteed one way or the other, and that decision is up to the board.
So the board, you will educate the board and advise, so the board will make that call whether they want to pursue its honor before the next board meeting or at the meeting?
Yeah. Other than that, then it would just be an outlot that would still be the responsibility of the developer. Also, we would obviously consult our Parks and Recreation manager about that prospect. Normally, we wouldn't want to take something that unless it had some like improvement, like immediate park improvement value. The previous iteration of this plan, we had talked about a walking path that went like encircled, was a quarter mile around the wetlands entirely, which would be a pretty neat addition. We also talked about the feasibility of an actual entrance where it was signed and people could maybe perhaps park their car to go into the park, whereas that is not present now. You have to kind of know where it is and know that it's there in order to go back to it, which is also kind of cool. Sometimes some people really like that. So
As far as this particular project goes, as of the current status, by creating this outlot, sort of the option, the door remains open to whether the village and developers want to pursue that park
Yes.
option or not.
Correct.
Nothing's foreclosed.
yeah, and if we lined it up, if it had been lined up in the Parks and Open Space plan, it would almost be de facto that if they dedicated it, it would go through that in lieu of process, and it would just be rather rote that would go through without kind of amending anything. The last point I wanted to make, and it was actually kind of an addendum to what Ron was talking about the fact that this zoning is basically conjoined with the preliminary plat. If the plat doesn't split it into 103 or 104 lots that meet RL1 zoning, it doesn't get RL1 zoned because RL1 has a lot maximum size, and you can't create an illegal lot. So they kind of are, pardon the pun, part and parcel to each other. So but it's kind of, I wanted to split those discussions where we can just basically talk about the zoning and then talk about the plat.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Nancy.
to Robin. I have a couple of comments and as a follow-up to Commissioner Van Beckham. My first question, Robin, is what are our current park fees, the park impact fees?
So I think it's $1,100 a lot or unit.
Okay.
It's more nuanced than that. Hold on one sec.
It might have been revised since then. All of the impact fees are collected by the building department when things are pulled up, so I never get to see those.
Why is this doing this?
Studio and 1 bedroom is $550 a unit, 2 bedroom is $825 a unit, and everything above that is $1,000 a unit.
Okay, so so in order for the board to consider taking that dedication, number one, they'd have to be looking at the value of the impact fees. Those impact fees are used, have timelines on them for use, and need to be used, and can be used in any park or within our park system. So that's gonna be a big decision for the board to make, just so you know, to lose that kind of revenue to take, this area. My second comment is, like trustee Boccia, I have been receiving phone calls actively from the neighborhood. And one of the questions that has come up was in regards to that park dedication and its presence within our land use plan. So I hope that neighborhood will be happy to know, I got home from a public hearing in Kenosha County last night, in which I was promoting the approval of the Route Pike Wind South Branch project in Kenosha County to help finish our leg. And it was unanimously approved, by the way. But when I got home, those phone calls were in my head, and I stayed up for several hours, and I went through 235 pages of the park and rec plan, master plan for our community. So in regards to Mr. Van Beckham's question as to why wouldn't we take it, when you go through that park plan and you see what our planning director and Parks Commissioner Baumgartner has done, the studies on how we locate, where we locate, and why we locate parks are extensive. And every single element of a park is studied on an individual basis. And I really hope that some of you that are concerned about this will go into that park plan and look at how we came up with it, because we did recently approve the 2050 plan. In 2035, this section of land was in that park plan. But the idea when we go from a 2035 plan to a 2050 plan is what we're looking at is population, where the population is settling, what the kind of population is within certain areas and neighborhoods in the community. And so therefore, on a regular and consistent basis, our planner's job and our jobs as trustees is to make sure that we're updating those maps to be current and relevant. And the bottom line of that 2050 plan is that Turek Park, while it is an existing park, is a residential neighborhood park, isn't sitting in an area that needs expansion, and has, although limited resources on it, like swing sets and so forth, it was taken out of the plan because of the development of the park in the future in TID 6, and because of other parks, the campus park development, and because of Smolinski Park expansions, and because of determining through those evaluations done by professionals to determine where regional and larger area parks should go. So as I look at this as thinking that this isn't, the other thing we have to remember is the ponds for this association are going to be located in that outlot. The village board at this point is not in a position to be taking over neighborhood parks. The village stormwater utility has ponds that it owns and has ponds that it maintains, but in a typical neighborhood basis like this, my recommendation would not be to take it over, just FYI. Otherwise, we're gonna have Rolling Fields and Regency Hills and everybody else that has a pond in their subdivision coming to us and saying, well, you took that one, why don't you take ours?
Oh, absolutely. And
So that's my only point, is that I read the park plan, I recognize this is not in the park plan anymore, and I agree with the reasons why. And so I think, just for the developers FYI, at a board level, I'm gonna have a tough time not collecting fees so that we can enhance the parks that we do have in the plan.
absolutely. And to build on that, our recommendation would never to accept, and we typically do not accept any kind of land that's used for stormwater that's required for another development, because we don't want to put that maintenance on ourselves. We ask that basically a clause that we can assess, like if it were to go into disrepair or non-maintenance, we can assess then if we do need to get it cleaned up, but we would like that to be the responsibility of that particular parcel. And DPW has been very adamant about that they don't want to take on new maintenance responsibilities. So we would not recommend anything that's a part of the stormwater plan for this to be accepted. There is other kind of, wetlands can't be designated stormwater retention, so that's a separate topic. And yeah. And to backpack on the parks thing, there's different classifications of parks. This is a neighborhood park, which has a few facilities. Namely, the difference between a neighborhood park and a regional park would be structures such as like restrooms or concession stand or stuff like that, which are, million plus ticket items. They're big ticket items. So by expanding the land, you could be basically having the land footprint of a regional park, but if you only have the budget of a neighborhood park, that doesn't match. So that's why we kind of have those designations, and would be kind of a good reason to not necessarily add any land to any park that's available. So thanks for lots of good questions. Anything else about the zoning before we turn it over to the developer?
Well, I'd like to add my comment. Again, I'm reading the plan presented to this planning commission and it to the board. It does say that the staff recommend balancing these two concerns. I'm talking about a concern, and it's not talking about the park. It's talking about protecting the wetland areas adjacent to the park. So maybe at that time when it comes to the village board, we'll have to look at that. But it doesn't talk about dedication of the whole park. Is the wetland areas just, to alleviate the concerns of, or at least to accommodate the concerns of the residents. So I leave it over there. We'll see what that happens.
Yep. Okay. No further questions?
I just quickly state that I'm a big fan of small neighborhood parks. I think they mean something in this village and every village, where kids can actually walk to the park and neighborhoods can get to that park. I mean, regional big parks, campus park, great, but it serves a different purpose. And secondly, I guess I'm just curious, who in the village thinks about whether a dedication, who takes the initiative on behalf of the village, whether or not the village should be pursuing park dedication in lieu of park fees? Who decides that? You, staff?
Those two guys back there.
The way it works is the developer, because this is not identified on our park and open space plan, it's up for the developer to request that they are able to dedicate land to the park. The village board, if it were identified on the park and open space plan, would denote that on the plat and essentially reserve it for acquisition. But because this is not on that park and open space plan, it's not denoted on the plat. So the way it works is the developer would come to us and say, hey, I think this is good parkland. I'd like to give you X amount of acres. It could be the entire outlot. It could be a portion of that outlot, once the stormwater plan is designed, somewhere in the middle. Or it could be none of it, depending on what they want to do. Then the village, as a part of both the final planning process and the development agreement, would either agree to accept that or not through approving that final plat. So it's kind of multiple layers of approval. First, they'll need to do their stormwater design. Then they'll need to come to us and say, here's how much land we would like to dedicate as a public park. And then it would go through the final planning process between you all, Plan Commission, staff review, and then the village board approving or denying it.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
My only comment is, in regards to this, we're really talking about zoning here. All this discussion is nice, but it actually has to do with the plat, which is our next item. So in reality, we're only talking about, and we should talk about it, but this was only for the rezone, period.
Mm-hmm. And it's tied to some plat of approval that would basically cooperate with that zoning. So, yeah, like dedications and stuff like that are a part of the plat process, correct?
Correct, thank you.
Anything further?
Okay. And I will say, and Dustin, the presentation is also in there as well. I hope that's pulled up.
Do you wanna-
Yeah, thanks.
Am I the one who moves the slides forward, or? Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Tom McClayton, David Trandell. My partner is on a long-planned family vacation, so he couldn't make it today, so he trusts me to. I've got a very short presentation just to kind of meld in the zoning and the plat. So as soon as it's up, I'll,
One folder up from that. There we go. It should be there now.
okay. Okay, go to that. Do I move this forward?
Yeah.
Robin? Okay. This is an aerial of the site, and we just talked about Turek Park. You can see on the north there. The park, the vast majority of it is to the north there. I don't believe there's much, if any, parking for that park. This site flows from south, it drains from south to north, so it drains toward the park. So that's why you'll see on our plans that we've got the majority of the stormwater ponds on the north side of the site. And you can see that on the east side and on the south side, there's residential. On the south and east is the Serbian church, and then our entrance we have some land on Old Green Bay Road. And then there's the Biscayne residential in the kind of the northeast quadrant there. As we talked about, we're talking about RL1 zoning. When we first approached the Plan Commission and the board, and actually Robin and Sam, we were contemplating much more moderate zoning with, I think the first time we looked at this, we were almost up to 300 units. And the first presentation we made back in January of last year was 213 units, with the vast majority of the project 4, 6, and 8 unit buildings. So we've reduced that to total lots of 103 lots. There's 46 single-family lots that are basically on the perimeter on the east and the perimeter on the south along Royal Oaks Drive and Brown Road. And then in the interior, they are duplex lots. They're duplex, not twin homes, so they're contemplated as just one lot for 2 houses. But that's how we've set it up. Our civil engineers set that up nicely for us. This will give you an idea of the current layout. As you can see, the dark blue on the left on your screen there is actually north. That's where all of the stormwater will be detained. There's about 3.5 acres of wetlands, and over 2.5 acres will be preserved on the site. There's some small pockets that we are working with the DNR to fill in, and we're I think in line to get by the permits to fill in those small areas. There's 7 areas of wetlands. The 2 primary areas on the north are the 2 that we're retaining.
Can you please elaborate, because I can't see very well, so this color coding, the purple or the single lots?
The single-family lots are along the or the single-family lots are
Are they?
on either side of Ascot Road, kind of the north-south road that parallels Royal Oaks.
Royal Oak, okay.
And the ones on the perimeter are larger, they're 7,200 square feet. The one interior lots for single-family is a little over 6,000 feet.
Okay.
Cyan? Got it. That's a
And the
color, right?
brown color,
The duplex.
these are duplex. I
And
just want
then
to make sure that
The brown lots are
brown was
the duplex lots.
Thank you.
This is just an example of something we've done, put together for another site that we have in Wisconsin, just to give you an idea of the quality of the project that we intend to we hope to build there. I would say that compared to maybe some of the last 3 or 4 developments that have been done in Mount Pleasant, this is far superior in quality. I'm not going to badmouth anybody, but I'm just saying, from our point of view, this is a superb area to put in very high quality, both single-family and duplex homes. This is an example of the duplex. You'll notice that the garages are separated. I haven't made up our mind whether they should be together or separated, but
That won't even fit on
this is kind of hopefully gives you an example of what we intend to build there. We've been working with our civil engineer, Nielsen Madison Barber, to create a stormwater system that will handle the entire site without any issues at all. We're going to preserve, as I said, about 2.5 acres of wetlands, primarily on the north. And then along those wetlands, we'll be planting flowers and make it look very attractive.
daisies.
One of the things that we are focusing on recently is the need to create a homeowners association to handle primarily drainage, stormwater, and other common expenses, but there are other things that will be part of that. So each unit owner will have a proportionate share of these common expenses. The only thing that's maybe different between the duplexes and the single family is the roof and the exterior, because you've got maybe 2 families living in the same building, so you know, we need to accommodate the possibility that one of the roofs goes bad and the other doesn't. And essentially over the last year plus, we've attempted to reduce the density. We've gone from 213 to now down to 160. We've reduced the density of a particular lot, whereas we had 4, 6, and 8 unit buildings. Now the maximum is a duplex, which is a 2-unit building. One of the things that we've done here, and maybe I can go back to there, as you can see, there were originally 5 entrances, north and south on Providence, Old Green Bay Road, and the 2 smaller entrances onto Royal Oaks. We've requested a reduction in the number of entrances from 5 to 3, and in meeting with the neighbors and just kind of thinking about it with our engineer, eliminating the north and the south entrance to Providence Drive will reduce traffic significantly, cut-through traffic, raceway traffic, however you want to call it. And it'll also help us enlarge on the north side the stormwater basin and help the drainage considerably. I guess there's one thing that there's as you can see, there's an entrance off of Braun Road, the bigger of the two. That actually is a dedicated driveway easement. So that is, we have to plat that, but it's not part of 103. That's Unit 104. And so what we did there is just leave that as a plotted. We don't intend to do anything else because we can't. It's been an easement for probably 15 years. And the other thing we did from previous plans is we moved the entrance off of Green Bay Road further south, which we thought more toward the church site than the other site there. So that would be, I think that helps, it certainly helps the neighbor on Mr. McGraw on the old Green Bay Road. And I think the closing of the north entrance to Providence Drive is critical to the neighbors, and it also helps us in expanding our stormwater system. Thank you.
Any questions for Tom? Tom, just a minute. Just a minute. Any questions for Tom? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation, and I can see from some of your additions to your restrictive covenants that you are hearing us a little bit better. I have a question regarding the duplexes. Within our code, you showed us a beautiful picture of a beautiful structure, obviously very North Shore, and having sold real estate in that area for 15 years ago, I'm very familiar with it, but it's a beautiful building. My assumption is that you might potentially be, is the intent that one person is gonna build that 2-unit building and own both sides? Or is your intention that potentially one side would be one owner and the second side would be a second owner?
It could be somebody who owns the building and then rents out the other one. It could be either way. We'll set it up so that each of the duplexes, 57 lots for duplexes, which means 114. So there'll be 114 unit owners that will pay into common expenses.
And I guess my question, and this might go to staff, Sam or Robin, when we've talked about the code and we've talked about these duplex lots, I've had a lot of questions on them over the course of the different projects we've seen. So it's my understanding that under the RL1, on, let's pick any lot that's a duplex, let's say, well, I know, let's say lot 27 is a duplex lot. Or is a lot that you choose to build a 2-unit home on it. Under our code, in order for you to be able to sell off that second unit, it's my understanding, in talking to staff, that lot would have to be further divided in order to do that.
Yeah, I think then it would become a twin home, where you've got 2 skinny lots that could have the same building, but there's a lot line right down the middle. Am I, Robin?
Let me clarify, this is like the nomenclature mixes everybody up. What we call a twin home is basically a duplex with a lot line down the middle, where each of them are structurally separate, but they share a common wall. A duplex is basically 2 units on one parcel. Now, the ownership structure that can vary. It can be one owner renting out the other unit.
Correct.
It can be a
if it becomes a twin home, then you've got to further divide the lot, because the twin home would be, so again, this is really a cautionary tale, because, you know, what you're presenting to us is that you're gonna have you're gonna put duplexes on these lots, and that's fine. That's allowed under the code. It's cautionary, though, in terms of what our anticipation is of how they're gonna be used. And that further goes on to say, when we talk about, and this is more platting stuff, but it is relevant to the zoning. I want the neighbors to know, and as well as the developer, that, you know, the duplexes are the duplexes, and these are substantial units he's showing us. I highly doubt that one person is gonna build that kind of a structure on one lot, rent out a side, and make it work. In other words, I think that I see these as wanting to have individual ownership of each unit.
Yeah, the twin home was probably a misstatement because of the nomenclature being like twin home, duplex, twin house being very specific separate things is kind of a quirk of our code. More to be very clear, but it's easy to get those mixed up. The way that these are set up, that converting like what is a duplex lot then to a twin home would be very hard, if not impossible. No one can come in and just drop a lot line after the fact, because you would have had to build to that standard. So when you have a lot line in the middle, both walls have to be fire rated. So you basically have to build two walls that touch each other as opposed to just one.
Right, so in that, given that scenario, though, going back, it's one lot, it has a duplex on it, and the owner of that lot and that duplex says, I want to sell my other half. So now the twin home won't work because they didn't set it up right. So now they would be forced to create a condominium on that lot, a single lot condominium. Is that what you're saying, or would the lot be divided in two via CSM?
Yeah, so the duplexes right over here, in Heartland Village, those are single lot condominiums. Each one of those is a condominium for themselves. As a matter of fact, like the twin home style, that hasn't been done in Mount Pleasant yet. That's something that's available in our code, to encourage different ownership styles and structures. But by far, it's either been a duplex where it's one owner owns both units, rents out the other one, or most of them are the condo style like that.
Pike River Crossings, which I believe is in Summers, not Mount Pleasant, has, that has twin homes.
Yeah, the new one, the very, our newest subdivision
Right.
is Twin Homes. It's the first one that actually has incorporated it into the plan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further, Tom? Nope. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Robin, where do you want to go from here? You want to?
Okay, so if you have any other questions of me, you can ask questions of me. Otherwise, I would prefer if we basically like decided and like voted on the zoning issue.
Zoning.
If you wanted to take any other comments on it, you know, now would be the time, but the thing is you would probably want to limit it to the zoning issue, because we don't want to go far afield in the discussion to all the things that we're going to discuss with the preliminary plat, which includes roadways, the park dedication, lot sizes, entrances, exits, all that sort of stuff. So that decision is on to you guys, but my recommendation would be to consider the zoning itself, RL1, and then move forward to the preliminary plat.
Okay. Is there any public comment specifically on the zoning? Not on the preliminary plat, but on the zoning? Specific to zoning? Please come up, name and address, please.
My name's Ted Snagowski. I live at 3627 Providence Drive, so I am one of the neighbors. There has been movement. You said that they're hearing us a little bit, but we continue to come back to these multifamily on a single lot that doesn't fit with anything in our neighborhood. So you go RO1, which is a zoning change that was, I'll say in my words, snuck through during COVID, that allows 1 or 2 structures on a single lot. Just like this whole process, the communication has been terrible. Again, we got no notice of this meeting. We're 300 feet from the edge of this development. We got no notice. Thankfully, Ann and a bunch of neighbors are still keeping an eye on it. So I reject the RO1 without the same restrictions that they're imposing on the east and on the south. Impose a single structure per lot under the RO1. Otherwise, get rid of the RO1. It's meaningless. To that end, I know I speak for a lot of my neighbors, and we'll all be at the meeting next week. But this is a terrible piece for our neighborhood. You sit here and you talk about, well, we might waive fees and take park space and that. We keep being told this is for revenue for the township. So we're talking out of both sides of our heads here. I sit here in this meeting, and I'll be honest with you, I wonder, and I'm asking a question, a real legitimate question of all of you. Why do you continue to have this group if it's just gonna rubber stamp these types of programs every time they come up? And that's what it's done so far. Why is this meeting during the day when most of my neighbors can't get here? When other communities have figured out planning commissions should be when the public can get here and actually see the planning. So I oppose the change to the zoning as it sits now. Thank you.
Thank you, Judd. I'd just like to mention one thing. When you said it was snuck through during COVID, I couldn't disagree with you more. We had countless meetings on this, planning staff, public hearings. This was not snuck through at the last minute. This is something that we had to do to create.
2017
other-
and 2019, it was pre-COVID.
Yeah, it was pre-COVID, so it wasn't not snuck in.
None of us knew about it. And to make an RL1 low density, they have 1 or 2 structures on a low density lot. It's asinine.
Well, we're trying to meet what the economy is providing us, and that is we need more options in housing so that the young people or whomever can afford these things. And if we just go with the way it was with 120-foot lots, we can't build homes like that.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying further subdivide the zoning.
Okay. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else want to talk directly to the zoning?
Hi, I'm Ann Zog, 3930 Royal Oaks Drive. You've seen me before. I have comments about zoning and plat, so you want me to separate them? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
separate.
saying?
We'll get to the plat after we do the zoning here. so
And if I
just
cross
don't
the line, hit the buzzer, pull me off. As it relates to zoning, I echo what Ted said. One of the discussions we had with Tom and David, which we've appreciated them meeting with us, was having the village apply, and I might be saying this wrong, a deed restriction on the properties that are on the Braun, that abut Braun and abut my street, Royal Oaks Drive, anything that's single family. So to distinguish within the RL1 zoning, the deed restriction, my understanding is they can't do it, we can't do it. Somebody over here, I don't know who it is.
That's the plat, Ann.
Oh, so okay, there's the buzzer.
Well, just so you know,
Yeah,
that's
I got to
that's part
take
of
a
the
class
plat.
on some of this stuff. I'm really not very smart on it. And I believe everything else, if it has to do with logistics and roads, that's plat. Then I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Any questions for Ann before she sits down? No? Okay. All right, if there's no further questions, please, on the zoning.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Giordano, 6125 10th Street, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm the executive director at Root Pike Watershed Initiative Network. I too just got back from last night getting the South Branch first phase of that project approved, and that would not have happened had not Mount Pleasant did the North Branch, restored that whole section. other entities around Mount Pleasant look to Mount Pleasant as setting the example for striking a balance between development and, taking care of our natural resources. We're also partnering with Microsoft, and they are, as you may know, restoring their stretch of water through their property, which they didn't have to do. We're fortunate that Mount Pleasant actually introduced us to Microsoft, and we were able to come up with that plan. So I'm here on behalf of compromise, and I know that's not a word that lately is something that maybe is a good word, or people perceive as a good word. You either win or you lose, you get what you want or you don't. We've gotten pretty good at trying to find a win-win, and that involves compromise. So we've met with Robin, we've met with the developers, we've spent some time with some of the village trustees, and we put together a packet that I believe all the supervisors got that talks about the spectrum of development and the spectrum of what's environmentally important and what's important to the economy and our housing needs. The one thing I feel like has kind of been missing in our conversation here today is the fact that this parcel is defined in the Pike River Watershed Plan as being valuable. And the recommendation in that plan, a plan that Mount Pleasant, the Board of Trustees adopted, the parcel recommendation is to preserve that whole parcel. So that's one end of the spectrum. We have the other end of the spectrum, which is develop the whole thing, and in what I perceive, whether you call it low density or medium density or low density 1 or 2, whatever you want to call it, we're packing homes in here. And while I appreciate the fact that the developers have taken some of our considerations on the low end of the spectrum, we would like to see more done so that we get in the middle. And to us, that involves more open space and maybe a less dense development. I understand that's going to be super hard to achieve, but if anybody can do it, Mount Pleasant can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Chairman Davis?
Yes.
Could we have Sam or Robin speak to Dave's quote that the village adopted the plan and what that means? And to us regulatorily, in other words, did we adopt it? What does that mean in terms of today?
Sure. Sam?
Yeah, we adopted it in 2013, 2014, sometime in there. I think notably, there are competing interests when we adopted that plan. When we adopted it, the board at the time did not modify the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. So even though they might have adopted the restoration plan, there are still numerous roads that run through on the transportation element of the comp plan. So that's when we noted, to Trustee Bhattia's point in the executive summary, there are these competing interests. There are different parts of the plan that recommend different things for the property. That's why we're trying to kind of thread the needle here. Ultimately, the Park and Open Space Plan is the most up-to-date version that discusses where we are preserving land. So the Park and Open Space Plan was adopted just a few years ago. That is the most recent version that was adopted as part of our comp plan, as part of the land use element to our comprehensive plan, has the weight of ordinance. And so, yes, in 2014, we might have adopted that plan, and we do reference it in the Park and Open Space Plan. But the Park and Open Space Plan, the most recent version of the plan, does not recommend that the village board preserve the entire parcel as open space. So that's why we note in our executive summary for the plat, when we get to that point, there's a condition that they should include things like naturalized stormwater ponds and things like that. We actually had the same condition in some of Microsoft's site plan approvals as well, because they had similar properties. So it is kind of that, what is enough question? That is, what your feedback and the village board's feedback is there. We as staff made a recommendation, but yeah, the transportation elements shows those roads should be connected through. So how do we how do we manage all of that? We made a recommendation to you all, and you all get to decide if that recommendation is, good or not. But yeah, it's not as straightforward as like 100% preserve because the plan says so. That's not actually what the plan says. There's more nuance. Hopefully that makes sense.
Clear as mud, Sam, clear as mud. But that's been the way this discussion has gone, all along, is clear as mud. So, but
Yeah.
no, I appreciate that, and really wanted to get the definition of its, of the weight of the plan. Adopted is one thing, but integrated into code and forced to be used is another. So thank you. That was a very good explanation.
Ultimately, plans change over time.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, they're a living document, and we have to change with,
So we go with the one that's most recently been adopted, and that is the Village's Park and Open Space Plan 2050, which the board adopted as part of the comprehensive plan back in 2021.
And change the designation on the map for that area, for that site, for this site, I should say.
Ron?
Sam, for the future reference, maybe it will apply when we talk about the plat or so forth. The most recent adopted plan, is that cast in stone, or can that be reviewed by the village board by a majority or supermajority? Just I'm trying to understand.
It is cast in stone. There is a way to amend the Park and Open Space Plan and the comprehensive plan, but it takes typically at least 90 days from time of like submittal, so you have an actual recommendation, to formal adoption, including a mandatory statutory 30-day wait period in the middle. The same as any other comprehensive plan. So, for instance, on Monday, the village board cannot open up that plan and amend it. The earliest at this point that the village board could look at amending the Park and Open Space Plan to change the recommendation for this specific parcel would probably be sometime in July or August.
So when you say 90 days, so somebody has to initiate that request. Is that coming from you, or can they come from the village board trustees, or somebody else, or what?
It can come from either.
It can come
It
from
could come from the general public. It costs
Okay.
$1,750 to apply,
Okay.
but,
I wanted to understand, because we're talking about the plan, and this is the adopted plan, and obviously many of the concerns have been, we are looking at the compromises and adjustments, so I wanted to better understand. Thank you.
Yeah, and I should make a note to Trustee Washburn's original point on the Park and Open Space Plan. There are standards that are included in it that make those recommendations. This just wasn't us doing it. They came from the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission after looking at different walking sheds and areas and acreage and all of this. So it took us over a year to make that update to the Park and Open Space Plan. And that was kind of a routine update. So a full-scale update might even take longer than that. So I would caution, opening that up without clear intent, and also a fair amount of research into what that intent would be, because that's the same amount that went into the first draft to begin with. It's not to say you can't change it. It's just that we always, raise both eyebrows when someone applies, and we try to do as much homework as possible to amend the comp plan when it comes in. You all have amended the transportation element of the comp plan recently for a different subdivision plat. So between preliminary and final platting, Jeff Badke amended the transportation element of the comp plan to make sure that the roads on the comp plan matched what he was doing on the final plat. So that might happen depending on how the village board rules on this preliminary plat later on. But yeah, we only do probably 1 or 2 a year at most for comp plan amendments.
It's a big deal.
It is the biggest deal. It is the fundamental underlying of all our land use and zoning decisions.
Thank you, Sam.
I think Dave had a question.
Dave, can you come back up? We're being streamed, so people know who you are.
Thanks for entertaining my question. Does the village have any conservation developments? And if so, how are they zoned?
In terms of conservation plats, not really. We don't have any. Someone could propose one. There's nothing in our code that prohibits them. It's just even when they were relatively popular between the 90s and early 2000s, like they've kind of faded out of fashion. We haven't gotten any plats of people applying for them. Again, it doesn't rule it out. It's just we don't have really any currently right now. The closest might be like a Campbell Woods, and even that's not a standard conservation plat.
I want to add in for all of those that might not be familiar exactly what the term conservation plat means, when not to be confused with the general idea of conservation, where it's like, you know, we set aside natural area to be conserved or whatever. It's a very specific type of development where all on one parcel you have a portion that's developed and it's kind of contained within a small portion, and it's also attached to a portion that remains undeveloped, and they're kind of married together. It's not like a pure park or preserve. It's actually a developed parcel. It's just the ratio of development to preserved land is set. Sorry. I always got a but actually.
All right. Any other discussion on this? Otherwise, if not, I'd be looking for a motion.
Chairman Davis, you know, I think we have tried to make sure as best we can that we keep this discussion regarding zoning to zoning. And I know that it has had to take some walks off into the plat. And I really think in this case, the plat is the bigger decision. I think that, and is gonna have even more conversation. I think at this point, what we're looking at is what is the highest and best use for 34 acres of infill site surrounded by existing residential zoning. We have already made it clear that the RM zoning category is too dense, too big a units, and not acceptable to the Plan Commission and the Village Board. The developer has now come back to us with a plan that is a combination of uses allowed under the RL1. Although I know there are those in the audience in the neighborhood that don't like the idea of the duplex lots, the reality is that in this design, which is what we'll be talking about next, they are concentrated to the inside of the development, and very few, if any, of the existing neighbors are gonna see or feel the impact right against their properties of a 2-unit property. I don't see us looking at any, you know, the village board, that, again, going back to the park and land use plan, the village just approved or is looking to approve some parklands in another area of the community for purchase because they were made available by the owner. The owner came to us and said, we're gonna sell this property. It's in the 2050 land use plan for parks and open space. Does the village wanna buy it? That's the question that's come before the board recently. In this particular situation, this property is no longer in that plan. It abuts an existing park, a neighborhood park, as we've talked about, but in my mind, at this point, the zoning that's recommended for this property is as good as it's gonna get. We don't wanna go up to RM, and we're not gonna go down to RE, which is 5-acre larger lot. That would be a waste of tax base and a waste of an infill site that is in a more densely populated neighborhood and area. I think that, again, most of the discussion and the concerns I have go forward to the plat, and I am anxious to actually get to that discussion. So, in that regard, I would be willing to make a motion to, I gotta get my agenda here and all my papers. Oof, sorry. I would be willing to make a motion to recommend to the village board the South Green Bay Road zoning map amendment, ZMA 25-2, subject to, number 1, the condition on page 8 being corrected to PSP 25-1, and number 2, that we are provided some sort of notice at the village board from Village Attorney Smith, just to speak to the proving of the substantial changeability, and that would not be getting us in trouble,
The email's already been sent away.
no doubt. So, that would be my motion on the floor.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes.
No, I don't have a discussion, but I totally agree with my colleague here, trustee Washburn. We understand there are residents, people in the audience who are not too pleased with the RL1, but this is the code right now. And like trustee Washburn said, we cannot go any farther than RL1. I wish we had RL1 only for the single home, but that's not the way it is, so based on that, and it seemed to me that after rejecting RM1, which is a more dense, this is this is as far as we can go, because like we heard that this piece of the land is not is not dedicated in 2050 plan, and so whether we develop it now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now, this is going to be developed, and for that reason, I'm going to support the motion.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That is for the zoning amendment. Next, we are going on now to the Sanctuary of Pike River preliminary plat, PSP 25-1. And again, there will be time to speak.
Okay, so this is going to be, we're going to try to get through the main things that we normally do, and then kind of address the kind of decision that you guys get to make and discussion we get to have. So this is PSP 25-1. As before, it says it divides the parcel into 104 lots. There is the information about lot 104 being not actually used to build a home on it that's a new one. I'm sorry, because of that easement. But we will talk about that when we get to it. Okay, so it's for 57 duplexes and 46 single-family homes. Although, I mean, as we said, the code does not specify necessarily which one is which, but the developer has indicated that in its site plan application. The zoning would be RL1, and we're gonna move on to this one. So we reviewed, this is the kind of the overall site plan or the preliminary plat as submitted. On the left in the small print is the conditions on site plan as is, assuming that the exception request is granted. A lot of that stuff is kind of either boilerplate or kind of things that we ask that developers add on to plats that are, it's not standard. That we ask a little bit more information on plats than normal. But two of them are basically related to finalizing engineering and stormwater plans, which is always between a preliminary plat and a final plat. One is about the public walkway that was created a part of the Royal Oaks subdivision between lots at 82 and 83. 20-foot vision triangles on the intersections, public street lamp on the corner of intersections need to be indicated on the plat, and street trees. And those have to be approved by the Public Works Director. To kind of clarify, we haven't had these conditions not on CSMs for quite some time. The CSM later actually has them because we sent it back with those comments early and we got them back. So it's not necessarily a huge thing. So, and then the other thing is because it has over 100 lots, that it needs to have a traffic impact analysis done on it between the preliminary plat and approval of the final plat. Previous applications did not because it didn't have 100 lots. This one, since now the lot count is over 100, that triggers the TIA requirement. Okay, so that is, and you can review our executive summary about lots, the things that meet the requirements and so on and so forth. It's rather extensive, as well as the fiscal analysis, which is fairly similar to where it was beforehand. But what I'll get into is like mostly what we're going to be discussing is the street arrangements. So in our subdivision code, it states that the street layout shall conform to the arrangement, width, type, and location indicated on the adopted county jurisdictional highway system plan, the adopted village official map, or the adopted village comprehensive plan or plan component. So the official map is the one that's on our GIS. So this is the current accepted village proposed road layer, and I don't know if I've talked to you guys, any of you guys about the proposed road layer, but the originations of them are sort of shrouded in mystery and legend, but they've been around for a long time. However, I've consulted the ancient tomes and find where this particular one came from. This is from the neighborhood plan, Imston Hills Road South, from July 1991. So a lot of these things were back when we were a town and we did a lot of neighborhood planning, and these layers were a part of that thing. And they've kind of been adopted ever since because a lot of them were common sense things. And that particular plan goes in about the connections and 1 on 1/4. So it was also updated in a 1998 rezone application and or when the Royal Oaks subdivision was put in, because in this plan, Royal Oaks Drive doesn't exist or is not even proposed. So now when we're looking at this particular layout, this is not what we've been talking about for a while. So how do we get from there to here? Well, some aspects of this proposed road layer are insufficient 30 years later for lots of different reasons. The ordinance does give staff the flexibility to interpret and those master plan documents and guidelines to follow when they are insufficient and also propose new alternatives. So when you're looking at this particular layout, what jumps out is what doesn't work and what we have never really asked of the developer is that one of the proposed roads, the extension of Biscayne, goes through wetlands in the Pike River watershed protection area. Wetland standards were different back in the 90s. And also that protection area wasn't established until 2013, as we had talked about. The sort of square section of those roads, that arrangement and alignment of the roads, besides the fact that they're just weird, they do not meet our criteria on block length. So in our subdivision platting guidelines, blocks should be within 600 and 1,200 feet in length. The short sections of these are basically 250 feet, and the long sections are 350 to 400. I don't know how that arrangement happened. It doesn't make sense. However, the code gives us flexibility to be like, okay, that doesn't comply. Well, how do we go about it to make sure that we get to something that still meets the spirit and intent? The bottom exit to Braun Road, it's not wide enough for a 66-foot right-of-way without acquisition from the neighboring properties and possible demolish of homes. So it's not practical. Additionally, that's only 600 feet from the Taylor Avenue intersection, which is a larger intersection with the county trunk highway. The other two spots that I've notated that the roadway would unnecessarily go into existing homes not under common ownership with no benefit to connectivity. So there's that cul-de-sac that goes into one of the properties, two properties there that have homes on them, and then you have that little road entranceway that goes back into a property of Royal Oaks Drive. This is basically what happens when there's development approved after the plan has been implemented. And they did these on an ad hoc basis whenever they had proposals for subdivisions that gone through. This is not this parcel's first rodeo. It's been talked about, not even just with this particular set. Even before then, this parcel has been discussed quite a few times over the years. So how do we interpret that? So how do we take what is on our adopted transportation comprehensive plan, official map, and then use it to guidelines to give to developers to say, well, what are we expecting out of this? So the code, the subdivision platting code, gives us authority to recognize functional classification of streets and shall be developed and located in proper relation to existing proposed streets, to the topography, natural features, streams, existing trees, and to public convenience and safety, to the most advantageous development of adjoining areas. And each land division shall be provided with satisfactory frontage on a public street. So how we take that particular map proposal and convert it to something that we have been recommending to the developer is that we're essentially boiling it down to, there's basically an east-west connection from Little Prairie Road, which is stubbed off of Royal Oaks, all the way over to Old Green Bay. Similarly, Hillside, which is stubbed into this property, would connect east-west to Old Green Bay Road, but it would go through and remain at the church property, which would be an open connection to further extend. The other thing is that there would be a north-south connection from Braun Road to Providence and Biscayne. That's basically our takeaway from what you can get with this, and that would still comply with other aspects of the subdivision ordinance. So that's what we had been going on. So the road layout on the left is generally the road layout that was in the last subdivision plat application, PSP 24-1. This is that same road layout updated with the sort of the zoning and lots of this current one. And that's just as a reference point. That's not what the applicant is proposing, but that's something that we're showing that is what we felt met the spirit and intent of the comp plan's transportation element. All those connections were there. And it allowed a future connection across the church property, which they have indicated that they're interested in developing once they kind of get their act together. So what is proposed is on the right, and that removes the connections to Providence and Biscayne, as well as to the south to Braun Road. So that is what we're looking at and comparing. So the exception process is this. So in the judgment of the Plan Commission, it would be inappropriate to apply literally the provisions of Articles 7 and 8 of the ordinance, which basically say that you have to meet the comp plan road layer. Because exceptional or undue hardship would result, the Plan Commission may waive or modify any requirement to the extent deemed just and proper. And those are the four conditions. So exceptional circumstances, preservation of property rights, absence of detriment, and then it requires a majority of vote of the Plan Commission. Okay, so I can go ahead and, does anybody have any questions on process stuff before I get into those?
Move on.
Or even the conditions that were at the top of the hour. Okay. I'll ask this to the developer. Tom, do you want to, so I have these basically copied straight from your addendum, which they have all got in their packets. Sorry for the small text, there's nothing really I can do. Do you want me to go over both of them and present both of them, or do you want to present your argument? Okay, all right. So basically criteria 1, exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional, extraordinary, unusual circumstances or conditions where little enforcement of the requirements of the ordinance will reside in severe hardship. Such hardships would not apply generally to other properties or be of a recurrent nature to suggest that the ordinance itself should be changed. The developer in their addendum and requesting this particular exception noted that the comprehensive plan shows 9 connection points and 7 internal connections, that entrances in north and south will create a raceway or cut through the development, and speed bumps will not improve that condition. The planned roadways of the comprehensive plan would disturb the wetlands. A connection on the east side of the site leads directly into existing home of Royal Oaks Drive. The east connection of Brown Road does not have sufficient width. West connection extends through the church property, which is unlikely to be developed. A cul-de-sac connection to the northwest part of the site extends through wetlands and that cannot be constructed without purchase of additional land. Most planned roadways run through the middle of the site, would severely hamper the development. The comprehensive plan road layout will result in areas insufficient depth for a legally platted lot. I had mentioned that earlier. The cost in building and maintaining 9 entrances versus 3 enhances under the planned roadway system would make the new community less desirable, and the comprehensive plan shows 5 intersections in the main north or south roadway within a 1,000-foot section, which is not feasible or safe. So I will kind of right off the top, just rather objectively, that is basically addressing this, like that layout, the proposed road layer, and not necessarily the layout on the left, which is basically how we've interpreted that in order to be compliant with other portions of the code. Clear as mud, always. So the staff opinion as to that particular point is that there are no circumstances where literal enforcement of the ordinance, in this case, the application of the transportation element of the comprehensive plan, would cause an undue hardship. The connections were present on prior drafts of this plat application and were removed due to neighbor feedback, not exceptional circumstances. So the next point, preservation of property rights. That such exception or modification is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same vicinity. The developer's argument was that outlined in the narrative, the property rights of the neighbors, especially to the north, would be negatively affected by 5 primary and 4 secondary connection points to the proposed development. Traffic would increase substantially, far exceeding that of possible benefits of connectivity, with cars cutting through existing neighborhoods. Additional traffic results in increased safety issues. All environmental buffers and setbacks will be created and maintained in accordance with the comprehensive plan. All stormwater generated by the development will be detained within multiple ponds or facilities, and this will enhance the value and property rights of the adjacent homeowners. In staff's opinion, neighbor property owners have testified that they have traffic concerns such as speeding and cut-through traffic. The complete removal of these connections is not necessary to meet these concerns. Traffic calming solutions such as roundabouts, speed bumps, chicanes, which is basically kind of like waving the road a little bit, or even just any kind of curvature in the road, kind of slow those things down. And bump outs will slow speed to the limit and limit the desire to cut through the subdivision.
Can I just have you ask a question and see if I have this straight in my head?
Mm-hmm.
From a process perspective, these
Yeah.
exceptions you are going through, it's a two-step process. First, we have to look at exceptions that allow from deviation from the old existing comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing now. It's not exceptions that justify the specific plan that they proposed.
Yeah, so it is the exception. They're asking for an exception from the comp plan to basically for what they have proposed in
Okay.
this plat.
So the exception is on both levels. There seems to be a general sense that the old comp plan shouldn't be treated as,
It's not set in
there
stone.
has to be more flexibility from that.
So the flexibility is basically that the comp plan is back in that clause that says that it's in insufficient detail, which is basically means that parts of it are wrong, don't make sense, aren't applicable anymore because of other things.
So for the sake of discussion, if we assume we're moving past the old plan, we're not gonna hold them to that. We're going through this exception process to rationalize whether we want to deviate all the way to what they're specifically proposing in front of us today.
Correct. That's why I went through these particular slides to kind of show that process of how we identified that this was insufficient. And basically our takeaways as the overall meaning of what the comp plan was suggesting, and then comparing that and contrasting that. So for your purposes, what we're suggesting that would meet the comp plan is on the left here, and what they're suggesting is on the right.
All right, well,
And you wouldn't need to rule, we could be wrong, and if you disagree with us as far as to this justification, please let us know. But basically, our interpretation of that leads to the left connection, and then they're suggesting for the right. And you guys do have some flexibility in choosing a middle or whatever. That's why we're here today, and to hash it out. I'm almost done. So there's only this last slide, or couple slides. So yes, we proposed that basically traffic calming. We haven't done a lot of that in Mount Pleasant with our roadways, so that's something that's rather new, and we have gotten requests and claims for that, and we're trying to implement them into new designs. So the last one is absence of detriment. That the exception or modification will not create a substantial detriment to the adjacent property, will not materially impair or be contrary to the purpose and spirit. The developer's justification was that it's compatible with surrounding land uses, it's residential on all sides, and the development is with the exception of the church, that there's no change in the proposed land use, so there will be no increase in demand, that the proposed amendment would allow the property to be developed in accordance with the approved comprehensive plan. The proposed amendment is substantial compliance with the current comprehensive plan, and which provides for A through D, the extension of Biscayne Road through the church property, 2 inches up or on an extension. So they're talking about the previous plan. And they're saying that the original comp plan wasn't thoroughly investigated. So we actually say that with a side of 2 kind of cases that we'll go over, not a whole lot of property owners in the existing area will be specifically impacted by this change. It doesn't exist now, so how would you know if it negatively affected you? There are 2 exceptions to that. There are 2 properties that do have a detriment. So this first one is kind of a weird case, but this creates a lot over a driveway. And so this particular property, the driveway basically faces out onto the parcel. The original intention of that was always to be a right-of-way. It's 66 feet wide, exactly. It's on the comp plan. So by them orienting their garage like that, it was basically in anticipation that a road would go through, and now their garage connects to that public roadway. It's set back perfectly from that, so on and so forth. If what next to them becomes a lot instead, you have an empty lot that is not owned by them, that they do have, I've looked it up, they do have an easement, a driveway easement on, but you've essentially created a lot that's useless. And has no real value, and it's going to be held in perpetuity. You can't sell it, can't do anything else. You could sell it to that neighbor, but that's it. So otherwise, if that were to actually be developed into a home site, the property on Braun would have to reorient their driveway and build a new driveway. So that seems to be a significant detriment or pain in the butt. However, replacing that with a roadway would cause no change there. So the second particular specific property is, it's not as significant, but the owner of 615 Biscayne Avenue would lose the ability to create up to 63 by 110 lots from the back half of the property. So they have a property that goes almost 2 acres back. By not connecting that, they would not have access to that property. Not all of it is being used as backyard or anything like that.
Is that owner here, or have they contacted you?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, this is This is theoretical, and they would have that ability, but I mean, it's if you're looking at it from a monetary perspective, I mean, this is $400,000 at least. And what that land is worth if there's a road next to it versus what that land is worth if there's not a road next to it. And that was a road that was always planned to be there in one shape or another. However, so we don't know whether or not they had that intention, but that is a interpretation. As I said, this is not as strong as the one on Brown Road, but it's the justification that we have. The other thing about that is that is basically a detriment to the village itself, because and to the property owner association, because the exact nature and responsibility of the large unplatted area is unclear. And we will talk about that in a little bit, but because right as it stands, it can't all be dedicated to village purposes. So, and I will step, and unless you have any particular questions, you do have a lot of questions of me, but would you rather hear from the developer first? You go ahead and chime in.
If I could, I'd like to clarify one thing. Just jumping ahead, you've gone through this analysis of things that have to be taken into account, great. But when I look at the end of your write-up, usually staff recommends subject to conditions, or in favor, or staff recommends against. Your write-up does not indicate a staff recommendation that you haven't taken a position in writing.
So this is kind of like, I thought the same thing, but this process is that condition where like they have requested an exception. Our opinion is our recommendation that you don't take that, and we honor the comp plan. If you take that, then you would add a condition that the plat would be adjusted and to sort of accommodate that comp plan. But that this is the process that we're going through. We wouldn't, and if you're asking whether or not if it doesn't, if you agree with this layout, do we change our recommendation? No, we do not. We are confident in the Plan Commission and Village Board ability to make a decision in this scenario on these, and we'll live by that.
If I could, just keep going a little bit on this thought process.
Yeah.
So what you're presenting to us is kind of an up or down vote. Either we're going to agree there's reasons to deviate from the old comprehensive plan, and we think this developer's proposed plan satisfies these conditions and we like it, or we don't approve it at all and developer's back at square one.
No, if you don't approve it, you could accept our justification and layout, or propose something in the middle.
But usually we would accept preliminary site plans with conditions. Now, I see on page 10 of your write-up, you have, I don't know, 8 conditions. So if you're suggesting now that if we are okay generally with this site plan, we would approve it subject to the conditions on page 10 of your write-up.
Yeah, so
Or
this,
add to those conditions.
Or add to those, right,
those
right.
conditions, Tom,
So-
so that we, right.
Okay, I
Yeah,
just wanted
that's
to understand the end game and context for this.
yeah, so Nancy's right, and we separated it because we don't want to conflate the two issues. Like, even you have this decision on these things. Even whatever you decide, we still have our recommendation and conditions apart from that. Clear as mud.
Okay, I would just
To me,
suggest,
I get it completely. I'm
Okay.
all good.
Because we call it out so specifically and we're having this discussion, and honestly, I would recommend that we have a separate vote on it.
yeah, I would think so too. I was gonna suggest the same thing.
Yeah.
that-
That any
A
conditions,
separate vote on what?
any amendments to the conditions, so like basically either approve, like on this issue or any other issue, that those amendments would be voted on separately. Just as a clarity, to keep it
One
things.
item on the agenda, how do you do that?
So you would like basically make in Robert's rule, or as Sam clarified, that you would make a motion to like amend the Plan Commission's recommendation. And so it's a subject to the condition, just like you would add a condition. So, and you would say, and I would
Well,
add
get
that
to
condition.
We'll get to that,
Yeah.
yeah. That's ridiculous. We have no recommendation, so we are gonna be creating the motion. Therefore, to amend a motion we're creating seems ridiculous. to
No,
me.
no, no, wait.
But let's get there first, because I think we have a long way to go in terms of some questions and some comments back, so.
There's a base
There's a
recommendation.
recommendation.
Yeah. And then
The bottom of
whatever,
this one.
Oh, I see, okay, sorry, I'm sorry, I apologize. You're right, I see it.
yeah, like, so as is would be basically accepting what the developer has submitted. And then amending that would be to
All right, well, maybe
ask
we-
for it to be changed. All right. So, should I throw it to Tom now?
Tom?
Okay. Mhm. This one? Okay.
We've tried to keep it as simple as possible. The slide on the left is what we've been proposing in the past. We had two neighbor meetings. We'd had individual discussions with neighbors. They've all said that Providence Drive could become a raceway or a cut-through, and that would create safety and traffic problems. So what we did is we went from 5 entrances to 3 entrances, the North Providence and the South Providence Drive entrance. Clearly, the more important of the two is to close the north entrance, because that affects everybody on the north portion of this site. And the south, it's a driveway easement. There's 104 lots. We exclude that from our count. That's 103. We didn't plan to do anything. All that would need to change if we had to open up the south entrance to Providence Drive is we'd lose one single-family house, as you can, I think you can see,
Number 103.
yeah, north of the driveway. So, we've met with the neighbors, we've tried to accommodate them. I think they had some great suggestions on Providence, and that's all we're asking, is that you shut down the north and the south entrance to Providence. The the fire department has agreed with 3 entrances, according to their latest response. And if we had to choose, I'd close the north entrance.
Yeah, staff is in agreement of that priority. You know, if you had to lose one, it would be the one to the collector and not to the residential street. But this general area has issues with dead-end roads, and a lot of them have been cut off for one reason or another. And it kind of funnels all of the traffic to certain roads, such as Regency Hills, such as Taylor, and whatnot, because there's no actual way to get fully north-south or fully east-west then to take those. So that's just, caution. The other thing is that since it is an outlot, there could be alternatives in order to basically reserve that in case, conditions change, or there is a proposal for the back half of that property or something like that. So that is where we're standing.
Our civil engineer is right here. He can address this question a lot better.
Sure.
Allow him to speak.
Sure, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mark Eberly, Neil Smanson Barber. So I guess I want to speak to this particular connection here, if I may. So it's not only, pushing the roadway through, but in the area where that roadway would make that connection over to Providence and to Muscane, there are wetlands in that area, and they're some of the rarest and highest quality on the site here. So it's also a lower area here. So if that right-of-way were to be pushed through. We would be tight to that neighbor's property in order to elevate that, provide drainage and grading and sewer and water, those type of things. We would be having to go to the neighbor to get an easement to fill on their property, which would be in the area of those higher quality wetlands. So we do have a wetland issue in that area. I guess second point here is, really, as civil engineers and land surveyors, our job is to try to be in the middle and try to take everyone's concerns, from planning and zoning and the developer and police and fire and stormwater and all those things and mold it into a ball here that works here. So as you know, we're into the third iteration of this plan here. And I think we've come up with a pretty good plan here. One thing I want to mention to you is in this current iteration, we have the same number of units, and actually a pretty reasonable number of units here, but we have 900 less feet of roadway, okay, with the connection to the north and to the south. So that's 900 less feet of sewer, of water, curbs, gutters, that type of stuff. So yes, there is some savings to the developer upfront to do that, but it comes down to an efficient use of municipal dollars in the future. These things cost about $1,500 a lineal foot every 12 inches to build these days, okay? At 5 or 6% per year over a 30-year life for a roadway or a 90-year life for a sanitary sewer, we're talking $8,000–10,000 a foot to replace, at that time frame. So just think about that. So I think it's a well thought out plan that it comes down to, good access for police and fire, good access for the neighborhood, and really takes care of that concern with the neighbors of the traffic flying through there. So that's all I wanted to say. So thank you.
No, Mark, stay.
Mark, you're not free to go yet.
Sorry, you're not done. You see me staring at you. So one of the concerns I have, can you talk to us about stormwater as we look at Little Prairie Drive? The engineering plans that you submitted, I did review this morning.
Okay.
And I don't see the ponds specifically outlined. In other words, most of your grading plan and your stormwater, you've got your center lines on your profiles and so forth. I can see where you take some big dips in terms of you've got the existing contours on there. You don't have the proposed on the profiles.
Correct.
But I didn't see the ponds per se, other than in Tim's presentation of his color rendering. My question is, in regards to Little Prairie Drive,
Yes.
in other words, in the original version, it went up against the Bauwas, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Bauwas property, who's an abutting property owner to the north along Old Green Bay Road. And then Metzger's are the ones that go up to Biscayne. So because of the way you've changed your road layout in this existing plan, both of those parcels are bypassed. So that Robin was speaking to the fact that the one off Biscayne won't be able to further divide easily, neither will Bauwas, and yet they connect. My question is it a hardship for you? You've got, behind Lot 16, you've got a stormwater pond, right? To the east of Lot 16, in his rendering, there's a stormwater pond, is that correct?
So, excuse me, I don't know if I'm following you here, but.
All right, the preliminary plat has Lot 16 on it,
Yeah,
and that faces Old Green Bay Road.
yes.
Right, to the east of that, to the east of Lot 16, is that where you have a small pond?
Correct. So there is a stormwater basin east of Lot 16, and now with the new configuration, that basin is tied to the larger basin further east of Providence Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Stormwater works out a lot more efficiently this way, and it's a single basin with a neck in the middle there.
It doesn't have to go under the road?
Correct.
All right, because my concern, as I was saying, and maybe I'm speaking more to staff than and my fellow commissioners, is that by putting that pond behind Lot 16 and creating Lot 16, the Metzgers, which abut to the north, which Robin just mentioned, would now be cut off from the southern extension of Providence, And then the Baumas, who are the property owners directly to the north of Lot 16, they won't have, their only frontage will be on Old Green Bay Road. They have another large lot, so now we've cut them off from any other public roadway access to further divide their properties. We're forcing them to RE. And so my question is, if you went back, and I don't, you know, the developer's gonna kill me, but if we looked at Little Prairie Drive being continued in its original path through Lot 16, then that would force your additional pond to go to the south side of that road. Is that correct? And
would
that's
have-
how it was drawn before.
It would have to.
And does that work potentially?
Well, as you know, all the stormwater is working from south to north. And we have the stormwater basins crafted around this large wetland complex that we're preparing. So the water knows where it wants to be. It wants to be on the south side. So, can we design it with that basin on the north side? Yes, we can. Is it more efficient, use of the land to have one large basin, the north side? In our opinion, it is.
Well, but okay, all right. It's obviously very technical.
Yeah.
But what's driving it is my concern over those two abutting properties. We've cut them off completely. Now, if you were to call the Metzgers, which I did 25 years ago when we all tried to buy Marshall Acres property, they would tell you they're gonna live there forever, this generation, the next generation, and forever in perpetuity. But we all know that that's not gonna happen. So I really have, I'm not saying that I need Providence to go through on the south. I'm not saying I favor that. I'm just wondering if there's a way that Little Prairie Drive can be pushed to the north so that those properties are abutting a public roadway to allow for their future land division. Noting that in the developer's agreement, it would certainly be reasonable for the developer to require a right of recovery or request a right of recovery to those properties should they decide to divide.
So again, that does become slightly challenging if Little Prairie Drive is moved back to be in line with Lot 16 and tight to the north line here. In order to have the proper grading and drainage, we would be having to work with both those properties to install that to some degree. And I'm speaking from a high-level view because we haven't looked at the grading for that analysis yet. But we would have to work with them to gain easements to be tight to their property line with that.
The road would be up against their property line, the right-of-way.
Correct.
And so you've got a terrace and a sidewalk behind your paving and your curb and gutter. You know, those might be temporary easements, but that might be to their advantage because now they have access to a public road and that would create value for their property. I mean, anyway, okay, I've gone too far. I apologize. But that's my question,
points.
and that's of great concern to me. In addition, and this I don't necessarily need Mark to stay up there for, but in regards to the Brown Road access, so I have made some phone calls. I have some experience with traffic impact analysis, and I was very concerned about that because, you know, I think going down to 3 accesses, the neighbors have always said that, you know, the more accesses, the more traffic is gonna run through our property. What I have found in dealing with traffic impact analysis and multiple accesses, particularly as I look at this location, in my opinion, the more accesses, the less traffic is gonna be flowing through each, as they are used to it now, because you are gonna have more options within that neighborhood to go left, to go right, to go north, to go south. If I live along Lockwood, or even north in the streets that feed now through Lockwood, the chances of me turning into this subdivision to get over to Old Green Bay Road or Brown Road are slim to none. I'm gonna keep going down Lockwood and just get to Brown Road. I think that most of the cut-through traffic from this subdivision is going to come from within itself. So I made a phone call to one of the traffic impact engineers that I've worked with many times over the years. And we talked about this situation, and he went online and we Googled it. And so there's two comments that I have. One is, I do feel that once this traffic analysis is done, this traffic impact analysis is done, it's gonna wanna see one more access, particularly to the south. Number two, the easement document that is attached to the property along Brown Road with the side-loaded driveway is clear, and it's very specific. And it states clearly in bold letters at the end of the easement that in the event this property is subdivided and a public road is recommended, that that property owner, the Schaefers, I don't know if they're here, are put on notice that it will become a public road right-of-way and access to Brown Road. So they have set that's been on their title. It's clear and it's specific that it states that easement, that access easement shall terminate upon development of a public right-of-way. So my recommendation for this plat is gonna be that lot 103 gets removed and lot 104 gets removed, and they become public right-of-way, so that we have a fourth access minimally to Brown Road, and that helps me think that I might support their exception. So, that's all I got on roads. Maybe.
Mr. Chairman,
Ram?
obviously, trustee Washburn has much more experience than me and many of us, and she brings some excellent, points for, so this plat, which on the screen on the right side has these, I don't want to say flaws or drawback, but these are the concern. Essentially what I'm hearing from you is we should go back to the one on the left. Then you have access to the Brown Road, and then you have access to the road.
Take
Correct?
out
I mean-
Providence, take out Providence,
Not
going
exactly,
north,
but it goes back from the right to the left with more modification like you're saying it. So I guess my question is, given that new information, are we ready to look at the plot, this SP, PSP 25-1 and approve it or not approve it at this point in time? Because I see it should go back to the drawing board.
I think until the traffic impact study is done, that really determines what our accesses are, in many ways, I share Ram's thought in that regard. I think the road layout's not done yet. And I know it seems like a lot of work for the developer, but that's very important for this neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't want to see it, recommendation to the board with.
We're cutting off other people's properties. We don't meet, I'm not prepared to grant them an exception at all based on the plat they've provided to us. Brown Road's gotta go through.
I will say that even, couple things is that even with a TIA, if a TIA recommended something that was contrary to the comp plan, we would have to basically make this decision to make exception to the comp plan, so.
It would be recommended by a traffic engineer.
Sure, but I mean, we're amending our master plan to do, modifications to the comp plan for approved subdivisions, like, Jeff Backey's, subdivision, we're changing that. We're just acknowledging that we're making a change from it. So, not that I say one way or another, but it's not like we talk about the comp plan or we talk about the TIA. We're gonna have to talk about both no matter what. So, and if you got a TIA back that recommended something that wasn't in line with the comp plan, you would have to make the same decision and say, okay, we're gonna make exception to the comp plan. And generally, I agree with, staff agrees with a lot of your points as far as where traffic's gonna funnel. In this particular plan, any traffic that does not go north to Providence is now going to go to Royal Oaks Drive, 100%. And so if somebody wants to theoretically go to Woodman's or whatever, and this particular plan, they would go over to Royal Oaks Drive instead of maybe split off. and do either or. But that's something that is up to you guys. I agree with Trustee Washburn on the connection to Brown Road almost being, in our eyes, mandatory. And we can decide that now. And also staff agrees that the connection along line 16, or lot 16, instead of that layout. So basically without the connection north to Providence, the left layout is still preferable to the right layout for the reasons Trustee Washburn outlined. It allows for future connectivity if that happens. It doesn't close out options.
I guess two questions. Chicken and egg, are the traffic impact analysis usually done prior to preliminary plans, or do preliminary plans usually get approved before a TIA is done?
Usually the second, but like preliminary plats and final plats are, you should have a general idea of how things are gonna lay out. And a TIA, unfortunately, is a time aspect. They can take up to 6 months.
No, it won't take 6 months.
Oh, okay. I just said up to.
It's
Hey,
not a DOT project.
Robin,
this is a-
could I
Yeah,
weigh
go
in
ahead.
here? Typically, we see it done between preliminary and final plat. A TIA will take a look at the road layout 9 times out of 10. They won't recommend full-scale changes to it, but they would recommend, hey, perhaps you need an extra turn lane here or some right-of-way here, that type of thing. Particularly for this type of local street. You know, it might be different if it was a state trunk highway where you're dealing with higher traffic speeds or something, but here it's relatively minor. So we typically see them between preliminary and final.
And the second question, I guess I keep being confused about this access to the south onto Braun Road. At first I had the impression it couldn't be done because it wasn't a wide enough lot, but now I'm hearing that
One on the left.
okay, the one on the left, so forget about the one in the southeast corner, the one on, okay, so that's wide enough. My sense is, given where this property is located, when people are leaving the neighborhood, they're generally going to want to go north or south on Old Green Bay, or they're going to want to go east or west on Braun. Giving them the only option of going east into yet another neighborhood, and then having to continue snake a couple more turns to get to either Old Green Bay or Braun is not that good of a forced flow. I mean, I understand why some people who aren't on Royal Oak Drive may like to funnel it that way, but I don't know that that makes sense. My sense is either, at the very least, it's gotta get pushed out to Braun to get some relief from everybody going west to Green Bay, or you've gotta give them Providence to the north, but one of the two, at the least, has to be made available from my perspective. That's just where I'm at.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean,
Yep, we're good.
As I said about half an hour ago, the Providence Drive entrances, north and south, we listened to the neighbors, and everyone that we talked to said, you can't have Providence Drive on the north side open to public traffic, because there's a raceway, people will cut through, et cetera. You know, maybe some of you can agree to that, but, and I said about half an hour ago, we're perfectly fine with opening the south entrance to Braun, because that's a driveway easement. The only thing that we'd have to do is change our plan to eliminate one of the lots. That's it, and it's ready to go.
There you go.
But I don't, you know.
I'm not arguing over the north side, by the way.
Okay,
And
fine.
I hope you don't think that I am. I understand that. We heard that before. But also, we have to be cognizant of what good traffic patterns are.
I agree 100%. The other thing is, we moved the entranceway off of Old Green Bay. The roads, well, you don't have it up there, but the roads we were given a year or so ago by the village says you had to have a north-south road, you gotta have an east-west road. And so all we're saying is that we have a east-west road, we'll have a north-south road, but close the North Providence Drive. And that way, if people who from inside want to exit on Brown Road, to your point, they can exit on Brown Road. If they want to go to Old Green Bay Road, nobody from that subdivision is going to go through Royal Oaks Drive to get to somewhere else to go there. I mean, that doesn't make any sense for those people. I'm not talking about you. But if we have 4 entrances versus 3, that's perfectly fine. And I agree, it makes sense. We're just trying to accommodate the neighbor who's got his driveway, or his or her driveway there. They're gonna get used to a 66-foot road that actually has traffic on it, as opposed to just his car going into his garage. So that's, but I think that the neighbors to the north on Providence Road Drive are significantly affected
Well, they're the ones
if that goes through.
it's written to. So having said that, to Sam and Robin and the Plan Commission, if we, I think any kind of recommendation I would make, if I would make it, would be to extend that Providence down to Brown Road and eliminate Lot 103 and 104. However, knowing where that driveway is, I've looked on the aerials, I've driven it, I've looked at Google Maps, I mean, I've measured it myself. I wouldn't be opposed, because we do have areas in here that have been taken down to a 60-foot right-of-way as opposed to a 66-foot. I wouldn't be opposed to that area being, going, as you come down Providence, being narrowed in that area of those 2 abutting homeowners to 60 feet, which would give each of them on the east and west side an additional 3 feet. If Public Works would support that and our DOT plan would support that, I wouldn't be opposed to taking that right-of-way down to 60 feet, giving each of those property owners an additional 3 feet. But the one property owner, it's been it's been recorded since it was recorded for their purposes, so.
Yeah, we recommended 66 on the ones that had existing right-of-way.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if that were something that would help those property owners, give them a little more room for their drive, for the one in particular, I would support that.
Well, the only question I would have there, though, is you'd almost have to make it non-parking. Because you're gonna be coming off of Brown Road, and you'd wanna have that 66 feet, because that's a main arterial.
Good
So-
point.
I mean, there probably would be parking restriction for a lot of that anyway, because of, there would be an oncoming intersection. So you're talking like maybe the addition of turn lanes or something like that. So you wouldn't want a parking lane next to very close to an intersection. So the methodology in the 60-foot versus the 66 is that the 2 ones that are 60 are not, they're not connecting to any existing
Right
right of
there.
ways.
Yeah.
So,
Colonel?
so Hillside and, the other thing is, I've seen it gone back and forth, even on these 2 things, it's referred to as, there's like Little Valley and Little Prairie, and there's actually a big discrepancy, like on the GIS map, it refers to it as like Short Valley, and then there's one that's Little Prairie. It's because there's not actually an address for that street, but there's a little beginning of that street. There's actually some discrepancy as to what it's actually named. And I've mentioned that to the developer, and it's just gonna continue as whatever it's supposed to be named, but. Yeah, like Short Valley is like maybe offset by like 50 feet. Yeah, and then this one is, if it's Little Valley or Little Prairie, it's sometimes confusing.
Mr. Chairman, I have a suggestion. From my perspective, I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the plat with adding one condition for that Brown Road, road being put through. It seems to me the open question is whether or not we want to have yet another condition for Commissioner Washburn's desire to do Providence, which I'm not in favor of imposing that, but I'm one person.
I'm not.
So if
Okay,
you want
don't-
to add 2, so maybe have a vote with 1 condition or 2 conditions is what I'm thinking, unless we're not ready to vote.
granting the exception so that
Yes.
because the roads don't match the plan?
The fir-
I do want to have a chance for public comment yet
Yes,
before we
but that's
make a
kind of
motion
where-
so that they can understand where we're
Sure.
going and we
I
can hear
agree.
their input. So, Ann, I guess you're first
Chairman
up.
Davis, I do have another question for staff,
Sorry.
and it's not regarding traffic, if that helps. And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time. The developer did provide us with a draft of restrictive covenants. So, and I had emailed earlier to see if the tax assessor was gonna be here today. The way this declaration is written, I think it still needs a lot of work, but it's not necessarily a preliminary plat condition issue. However, within this, they have determined that they, Stone Street Partners, are going to retain ownership of the outlots and the ponds and so forth. Typically in our subdivisions, each of our resident lots retain a percentage interest in the ownership of the outlots and the stormwater management pond facilities, because our concern overall as a board and as a village is, what if Stone Street Partners doesn't exist anymore and now those properties go ad rem? Do you have something to say about that, Frank? In your, based on all of the ponds we've done, there was a time when ponds could be held by the developer, but the developers disappeared and the ponds then went ad rem, and the villages or towns were forced to pick them
Quite
up.
often, the municipality gets stuck with them. And then you have to decide, maintenance and all that kind of stuff and try to assess the, developer, the subdivision.
The
to
homeowners.
Homeowners. Yeah, to get recompense for your digging the dirt out of their pond so it actually holds water.
So typically, the trend has been, and that's what I'm, that would be another condition. These were part of the packet. So, I won't be in favor of a motion to approve at this point, knowing that we have a traffic impact analysis coming, knowing that the deed restrictions need work. And number 3, I would like to see on the front of the preliminary plat, a note added that states, the lot numbers and the lots that are going to be restricted to single-family, one-unit housing. That will, in essence, act as a deed restriction, and I'd have to verify what exactly those lot numbers are for a motion, but I would like to see that note added to the front of the preliminary plat. Therefore, it would go forward in title to the final plat and would then act as a deed restriction, making sure that the residents know in the existing neighborhoods that those lots around them will only be one unit.
Yes.
If I may, yeah, I also had the same comment on that to ensure that on the east side and all those lots which have been identified as a single family, it should be noted down, and Nancy's comment is even better than you put that in the
On the plat, on the
plat.
To the plat.
I am still not sure that if we make the motion, what are we have the motion for that, because as much as it seemed that everyone seemed to agree that we can add the Brown Road, but I still didn't hear anything about how to address the concern of the lot 16 and up on the north, if in the future, if we get, because you don't want to be in a position where that property owner, or if they want to divide, and they come to the village and we say, oops, we missed that. I can understand from the builder, from the developer point of view, they talk to the neighbor and they don't want it, that Providence Road. But they probably also didn't think about what trustee Washburn has brought, because their concern is.
They don't want the
Yeah,
road, but
exactly.
they haven't thought
So-
about ever selling
so
it, or.
My
the
point
fact
is,
that-
at this point in time, we can add one condition, two condition, but I have no idea what we are going to be approving.
Right.
So I still believe that you should go back to the drawing board.
So a couple things. I want to kind of clarify, I would be very careful and consult legal about putting a condition that restrictive covenants of a nature that is not codified be placed on a subdivision plat. just saying, being very careful.
Are you talking about the lots, stating on the preliminary plat what lots are for what?
Yeah.
I've talked to an attorney from a title company about it. So I believe that it is absolutely legal, binding, and acceptable, and I've seen it on other plats that I've had approved that I've done, so.
I'm just advising caution, like, they've indicated that those are gonna be single-family lots and also indicated that they have no problem with that. I'm
They've
just,
indicated it not in one document that's enforceable.
okay,
That is enforceable. The deed restriction is enforceable.
just advising caution around that, that's all. You know, that's the only thing. The other thing is, it seems that there's, besides that particular clause, there are three things that kind of worth discussing, and that if people want to talk about, they can kind of weigh in on these things separately. It would be, you know, the opening towards Braun Road, the opening north towards Providence, and the location of the exit onto Old Green Bay. I think those are three things that you guys are discussing, and I don't think that they need to necessarily go back to the drawing board to decide on those things, because those are alterations that can be made between a preliminary and final plat process. You know, that's what the application for the exceptions is doing, is asking you, okay, what do you think? And laying it at your feet. So whatever you decide, that's what goes.
Before we go to final.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go to Ann now, who's been very patient.
Thank you.
I'm back, thank you. I just want to bring us back to late October, when those of you on the board voted no unanimously. The neighbors were here. We appreciated that support. And since then, Primestone has had 2 meetings with folks like myself, Ted and Lisa, and all the other neighbors that are here, and they listened. And so some of what you're talking about is a result of those conversations. I want to make sure Primestone gets credit. I want to make sure we get credit, that we're not trying to be pig-headed. We want to arrive at a compromise that keeps our neighborhood intact the way we believe it was intended, and keeps it safe. And while I appreciate the conversation I've heard today, none of you live there. Nobody's come to my house and walked with me or walked with the Snagowskis and seen the traffic that happens there day in and day out, and has happened there for years. And what you would see is people cut through to avoid 3111 intersection every single day, morning rush, afternoon rush. I've seen kids almost get hit walking off the bus or riding their bikes. I've almost been hit. My neighbors have been hit, almost been hit. About 2 weeks ago, the Peltier family, which is on Regency Hills, where Elwood had their house driven into, not once, not twice, but for the 3rd time in the 23 years I've lived there. So traffic and safety is a huge concern, and I can promise you those that show up Monday night are going to make a stink about it, because you have not addressed it. Just as an aside, I'm not trying to threaten you. I am just stating how it feels. In the packet, and some of the stuff that Sam and Robin make available to us, it states, and I'm just going to paraphrase, the complete removal of these connections isn't necessary to meet these concerns. A few more filler words, and then traffic calming solutions are available. That may be true, but that's not how your people are reacting when we ask for help. In November, I emailed Tony Byer, I have a copy in case you're interested, and gave examples of places in our neighborhood that will only get less safe as a result of this development, and you can do something proactively. I got a 3-sentence email dismissing me, along with an attachment of a former board meeting where speed humps were not approved. So unanimously, forever and ever, we're never going to do that. It said, I don't care, I don't want to hear about your concerns, I've got something to cover my butt on, and that really makes me mad. It says we don't care about your safety. So please know I'm going to talk about that on Monday night. On that same thought, when we met with Primestone, we talked about why do we need so many entry points? If you go to Taylor Harbor and you go to the apartment complex on Braun and 31, but both have two ins and outs, or whatever you call them, ingress, egress. This one has 5. I'd be comfortable with the Braun Road opening up onto Providence, but taking Providence from Braun Road all the way north to Regency Hills, which is their front door, I might add, and the Jaworskis and a bunch of other families, and then you open Woodman's, which is great. We're all looking forward to their terrific beer department. It's gonna be even less safe. Like, I can't be more clear than I am right now. That cannot happen. It's gonna be a problem. So when the developer said, what if we did this? We were all there, we're like, that seems like a reasonable compromise. So I want you to hear that from somebody that lives there and has lived there and will continue to live there. And if you wanna come over, I'll make you some coffee, we'll drive you around, we'll take a walk, as will my neighbors, and you can see that we're not BSing you. We're sincere about it. So the final thing, and before I go on, the emergency response times that was mentioned in Robin and Sam's comments, that's not an issue. You know where the fire station is, right? If I could golf well, I could hit a ball. It's so close. So we have never had issues with any of the neighbors that have needed support. And I could be wrong, but that's what they're telling me. The last thing on the deed restriction, that was the last compromise David Trandell and Tom made during the meetings in December and January. Is if we could, through the village, put a deed restriction on the lots, and I will tell you on my plan, 76 through 91, and 92 through 103, or 102 if 103 doesn't exist, as well as the opposite side of Ascot Drive, so 59 through 75, I think those are also single family. So that it's in keeping with all 4 sides that are single family homes. So if you can do that legally, I want you to do that, and I'm sure my neighbors would agree. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
I'd like to say I agree with almost everything Ann said.
Ted, can you give your name and address?
Oh,
again?
certainly. Ted Snigowski, 3627 Providence Drive. Ann's absolutely right on almost everything, but I'd like to see go further as far as the deed restrictions to get rid of them duplexes. Our entire neighborhood is single-family homes. Bringing in the duplexes and things like that don't fit into our neighborhood. I appreciate the fact that they took out the North Providence entrance, because I was gonna mention the Pelletiers as well. They're friends of ours. They've had their home run into 3 times, and it would be the exact same situation at the end of Providence Drive in Regency Hills, same T-type intersection that keeps causing this as people speed through our neighborhoods. Ann's absolutely right. The traffic is terrible at times. I'm thankful my boys are both adults now, but where our neighbors have young kids and grandkids starting to come over now, it's frightening to see the people that speed through our neighborhood. And S-turn even through Providence Drive right now. Heck, we're even a shortcut for the fire department to get to Regency Hills. So it is a terrible thing. What I'm hearing here is I don't believe you have enough to continue forward. You have a lot of questions as far as the traffic plan, as far as a lot of other things. I'm asking, as a resident of Mount Pleasant for almost 30 years now, that you take a pause. Let's relook at this. We're not opposed to development. We're opposed to the wrong development that doesn't fit our neighborhood. And we've known each other 28 years when our kids grew up together. She mentioned the Jaworskis, the same thing. We've known them 30 years. We all share these concerns. We all share the neighborhood, and we've stayed there all this time because we do have such a neighborhood feel. We start breaking it up with duplexes and all sorts of other stuff, it's gonna lose that feel. And we like our neighborhood. All of us are in a position to move. We choose not to. But I want my village township government to be responsive to our requests. And to this point, really hasn't been, to be honest with you. Ms. Washburn said earlier that the planning commission is, I forget how she exactly said it, but this planning commission has rubber stamped this plan twice already and gone to the committee, because we've had to fight it. So it's not like it's receiving much here. The initial high density or medium density, that was approved out of this committee and sent to the committee of the whole, where we as neighbors got together and fought it. Same thing with the last iteration. So I'm asking you to take a pause. You already, again, to my mind, and I'll say it that way, rubber stamp the zoning, because without any restrictions, without any further thought about maybe expanding the deed restrictions, we just rubber stamped it. I'm asking you to take a pause on this, and let's come back and look at it. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly,
Do you live to the north of this project, or do you live to the east of it?
to the north.
To the north. So if this one road doesn't extend up to Biscayne, then this subdivision is effectively not directing traffic into your neighborhood, correct?
If the exit to Providence, North Providence.
So that's your, just so I can understand your priorities, is that your biggest concern for both of you, that?
That is one of my biggest.
No,
yes.
what's your biggest concern? You only can have one biggest concern. Is that your biggest concern?
Oh, come on, in this day and age of gradations, everybody has concerns. My biggest concern, I'll be honest with you, my biggest concern was Braun going through and becoming a speedway.
Braun?
Or, I'm sorry, Providence. I'm sorry,
Okay, all right,
Providence.
then that's fair, just so I understand your
That was
concern.
my biggest concern. But following right behind it is, it seems like we're trying to drag a piece of Racine into Mount Pleasant.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Robin or Sam, but if you chose to, you could put a second structure on your property.
I've never looked and pursued that. Now,
I don't
well,
know exactly where you live, but just in general,
RL1.
am I correct?
No, there are covenants, so I live on Royal Oaks Drive, and there are some illegal, smaller shed-like structures, but the developer of that land now deceased, there are some pretty strict rules, so it might vary by location.
It might be varied by covenants, but by ordinance,
By ordinance, all of them could put another home on their
Ev-
properties.
right, correct.
And if, you know, if, with Bozador having deceased, I would assume at this point, your covenants and restrictions have expired. And so that means they wouldn't be enforceable.
Right.
So they're not enforceable anymore. So, you know, and we don't wanna argue with you guys about that. I think the reality is, this is a very tough project, and I'm gonna tell you that I have put more hours into studying this and trying to make sure that I, as a trustee, am looking out for the neighbors, but the village also. The neighbors can't always tell us what to do, because it's never in their backyards. I have looked hard at every aspect of this. I have spent hours and hours and hours on it, doing research and trying to, as Mr. Giordano said, determine if we're at the right compromise yet. I will tell you, in terms of your comments regarding 2-unit or duplex housing, that if you look at what is desperately needed in our area, is exactly that type of housing. In other words, it is the empty nester next move, right? Down from their 2-story home to their existing home to a duplex, a side-by-side, a condominium, if you will. And they're being built, and they sell out as fast as they can be built. Between Mount Pleasant, between Caledonia, between Pleasant Prairie, and Summers, where they're being built. So I guess
So you just
we're
countered
doing
my
everything.
argument. If they're all being built all over the place, why do we need them here?
Because there's demand for them.
No,
We
come on.
just had a
They're-
quarterly housing report that was done that talked about price ranges, that talked about what kind of housing is needed and the affordability of it, from everything from workforce housing up to luxury housing. I highly recommend you read those reports because your homes are all very, very valuable and desirable in the community. So you and I are gonna philosophically disagree as to what's needed or necessary, but again, my comment was that at least now the developer has taken those 2-unit lots and put them on the inside of his development. They're not gonna be, well, they're not abutting you at all, but to the abutting property owners, they will now be looking at single-family up against single-family. And that, I think, is a reasonable compromise.
You're reasonable and mine reasonable. You've been on board with this project since the very beginning, when you started coming to these meetings. You changed in the last one, so, hey, whoever you work for, whether it's the people that live here, the residents, or an Illinois developer, you make that decision, is what I'm saying. I'm asking you to take time, let's look at it, let's get the answers to the traffic study and things like
I
that.
agree completely.
Before we go forward.
I agree completely, that's what I said.
If you could.
Got me all riled up. It's Ann again. I think it's hard to approve the plat, given all the questions. There's more gray than when we started, in fairness to us, you, and even Tom and his company. And I would imagine, I'm thinking ahead to Monday night, if it's approved, you're gonna have a lot of people on your hands that are gonna, it's gonna be a long meeting, because we're gonna ask more of the same questions. And I don't know how procedurally you approve it. I don't know all those rules, but I haven't heard anything concrete come out of anyone's mouth that says you know what to approve, or if it's even legitimate to do so. My last thing, Robin, you had mentioned, this is very much about Ann's land right now, the walkway between Ascot and Royal Oaks Drive. That is my house and my neighbor's house. There is that 20-foot easement. We'd like to know more about what does that mean. I don't need the answer today, but are people going to be walking by my bedroom window when this is said and done? And are there going to be light? You know, like, what's the plan?
I mean, the plan is, I mean, it's listed on there as a public walkway. It's on the plat of your subdivision.
Right.
And it's been on there forever. That, like, having it going up to the end of the property and stopping it.
I'm fine with that. I've been mowing it and taking care of it for 23 years.
If you want it to be, like, if you're requesting it for it to be abandoned and then you purchase it, like, that's a different discussion. But just like Hillside and the other things, if you have, like, public right-of-way that's intended to keep going, we're gonna recommend that it keeps going.
We just want to know what that keeps going, keep going, whatever the grammar is, what that means. And not, I don't need it right now, but I would like it.
So it's a public
Sidewalk.
walkway for the stuff that's very long and it'll be used for dog walkers and stuff, I suppose.
And it would be a 5-foot sidewalk with 2.5 feet of grass on either side, because it's about 10 feet wide.
It would be a sidewalk between my house and my neighbor's house, going where?
It would, connecting the two, like, plats.
Street to street.
Street to street. Right
So
now,
just a sidewalk between 2 yards and nothing else?
that's what's on the plat currently. That's when you bought your lot, that's what was on the land division. It was never built, but that has always been there. So what Robin is saying is, we would connect that through at this time because it's always been there. If you don't want that, you can apply separately to vacate that, but that is a completely separate process from
Okay.
what we're talking about right now.
Okay, I'll ask you later.
Okay.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could, we've been talking in circles a lot. We're almost 3 hours into this thing. We got a couple other items on the agenda. I think you have a couple options here. I just want to lay them out. You can either vote to approve today, recommend approval. You can recommend denial, or you can table the plat. You've already recommended approval of the zoning, so that'll go forward to Monday night regardless, have its public hearing. The board can do with it what they will at that time. What they do with it will probably depend on what you do with the plat today. Either table the zoning to hold it up to match, or they could approve it because essentially the zoning is conditional on this plat getting approved anyways. So, you know, it is what it is. So I think it all depends on the motion, of who wants to make what. Generally, if you all are like, just, this is not, you don't like this at all, I would recommend that you recommend denial. If you think you can add 1 or 2 conditions per Commissioner Van Beckham's comment to address some of the things that we've discussed today, then I would recommend that you move to recommend approval with whatever conditions that you'd like to add to the ones that we already put on there. If you'd like to table, I would recommend that you specifically identify the items that you would like them to include, so when they bring it, we're not bringing it back too early or too late. Like, we've checked all those boxes, so when it comes back to the commission, we know we've addressed all your concerns. In the last point regarding the deed restrictions on the lots, the developer, deed restrictions are agreements between private property owners. So just be very careful, to Robin's point, in how you word that. I am not convinced that the village has the ability to end-run zoning regulations through forcing a different use type by mandating deed restrictions from yourself. However, the developer has said he is interested in adding those deed restrictions. So if you table it saying, if you want to add those deed restrictions, we would like to see them in the restrictive covenants, I think you are legally covered, and it gets the intent of what you're going there. I'm trying to thread that needle legally.
It can be put on the plat too, though, Sam.
Yeah,
It's a
Sam,
note
putting
on the
it-
plat that carries through. It's
notation-
been done
right.
time after time.
Yeah, but Nancy, the point is oftentimes those zoning districts already limited it to single family only. I don't know that you can deed restrict a by right use in a zoning district just because you want to.
But if the developer,
But if the developer puts it in there, you can ask, and he's said publicly today that
Yes.
that is his intent. So you can ask to see that, and that is
Yes.
fine.
I think we have a way forward. As this is preliminary, we have a way forward to get to a final if we wanted to,
Correct. You
with the
could-
right amount of amendments or,
Yeah, it's however many conditions you're comfortable with, whether you want to table it, when you want to see the traffic impact analysis,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. Our recommendation remains the same, formally in our executive summary, but it's ultimately, I just wanted to lay out those 3 options for you and whoever's going to make the motion, so it's clear to everyone what you can do.
Well, I'm prepared to make a motion. It may or may not pass, but at least I want to put something concrete.
Can I say one
Yes, go
thing?
ahead.
All of the kind of things that are not black and white, I'd like to make them black and white. We're willing to put a deed restriction on a single-family house on lots 76 through 91 and 92 through 103. 76 through 91 is along Royal Oaks Drive. 92 through 103 is along Braun Road. We're willing to, or we recommend, in fact, we agree to, that's a better way to say it, opening up Braun, but we've talked to a bunch of neighbors. We've had 3 meetings, 50, 60 neighbors, a lot of overlap, and they all wanted Providence Road not to go north. And that's why we put it in there. South, we were trying to accommodate the owner who's got a driveway easement, but he's gonna have a little more traffic, but he'll still have access to his driveway, and his life won't change that much. And any other gray areas that we've talked to, I think that our position is that we're willing to work with you. We've heard the neighbors, and what we're trying to do, we moved the entrance road from the north side to the south side to accommodate the neighbor Chad McGraw, who lives on Old Green Bay Road, and he's right next to 16. So we're trying to you hear everything, and we're trying to react positively to what we hear. So that's, and any other open items, I'd be happy to address those, but the deed restrictions, and we've said this to Ann and her neighbors, we're willing to say we're gonna build a single-family house. And the duplexes, they're only 70 feet wide, so we can't, first of all, 70-foot lots, we cannot build a duplex on any of the single-family lots because they're just not wide enough. So we have to totally redo that.
So a recommendation would be to acknowledge that the developer is willing and will identify single-family homes on those lots. We don't want to make it a part of our motion, just that we are recognizing that he is going to do that. Okay?
You can't because it's illegal for the village to put it on.
If he is willing to
If
do
he's
it.
willing to do it, that's
That's
fine.
what I'm saying. We are
Yeah.
recognizing that he is willing to. We are not demanding that he does it. We are recognizing that he said he will do it.
The other thing is, as far as tabling or whatever, you don't, the reason with the application for the exception is that you guys are gonna have to make a decision on these items. So like, once those decisions are made, then it's black and white. So I delineated them before, but it was Brown Road, Providence, and then you guys have brought up the location of where it exits onto Green Bay Road. So those are something that even if you tabled, you would have to make a decision on. And if you made a decision on it, well, everything is done, basically, for the most part. So that's where we're at.
Sam, are you comfortable with my making a motion based upon the verbiage in that green ink at the bottom of your, I think it's the first page of this set of materials? I'm just gonna make that recommendation subject to the conditions for approval and adding two conditions, one for the Braun Road egress and secondly for the designation of lots. And again, have a vote, and then if that doesn't fly, then someone else can make a motion.
I am comfortable with that.
All right, shall we?
Mr.
All right, Mr.
Tom,
Yes.
would you be willing to also add the revision of the ownership of the outlots from the developer to the percentage interest, which is preferred by the village? In other words, right now, that's part of what they've shown us is that they are gonna retain ownership of the outlots and the ponds. We as a village would want that ownership of the outlots and the ponds to be a percentage interest of the residents within the subdivision.
I understand the concept there, but Sam,
I'm comfortable with that. Section 74-2.6 discusses common areas or facilities shall be held in common ownership as an undivided proportionate interest. So I think
that-
that's supported by the ordinance.
so wouldn't the ordinance just deal with it?
I mean,
'Cause I don't know how to phrase that motion all that well.
It would, but, you can just make a note that they'll revise the
What they have
HOA.
presented does
How
not meet the
how do you want to
ordinance.
see it? You want to see it in the HOA? You want to
Yeah,
see
that would be
it?
in the HOA docs. So
Okay.
I would pose the motion, amend the association docs to meet section 74-2.6.
Okay, 74-2.6.
That's
All right.
good enough. That should cover
Shall I take a
trustee Washburn's
crack
concern.
at it? I mean,
Yes,
okay.
please.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that the Plan Commission recommend approval of the sanctuary at Pike River preliminary subdivision plat PSP-25-1, subject to the recommended conditions that are typed on page 10. There are six type conditions, and we want to add two additional conditions, that the developer come back showing the elimination of lot 103 and 104, and in lieu of that, creating a roadway access from the subdivision to Brown Road. The second condition would be that the owner follow up on his offer to indicate on the plat of subdivision or by deed restrictions which of the lots will be single-family and duplex lots. And then thirdly, I guess the third condition would be that the materials that are submitted indicate that the outlots would be held in the form of common ownership and subject to HOA restrictions as required by section 74-2.6.
Second.
I think that pretty much takes the gray area to black and white. Alrighty. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make a comment. Earlier, based on the discussion, I was recommending going back to the drawing board and table it, but after hearing all sides, I do understand that it's a preliminary plot with a condition. I think it'll come back, hopefully, satisfying my concern. I still have one concern as trustee Washburn, mentioned about the lot 16 and up, or we'll deal with that because that's not the homeowner's concern. So based on that, I'm willing to support the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
The only thing that I'll add is I'm not gonna support the motion, and I'm not gonna support it because we haven't addressed what happens with Little Prairie Drive and the access going over to Old Green Bay Road, and we haven't seen the traffic impact study. If the traffic study materially changes this plat, it's gonna have to come back to us.
But that is condition number 6. A preliminary plat be submitted and reviewed prior to final plat.
Do we
I
have-
understand, but if the preliminary plat and that if the traffic impact analysis says we're gonna change, all I'm saying is I wanna see what's gonna happen to those two property owners that are being cut off right now, because the road was routed down around lot 16, or lot 16 was created and the road was routed down below the property owner in the middle at his request. I think that's wrong from a future planning standpoint, so in that regard, I'm not supporting this plat.
You guys can either
And
hash
my
that out
motion,
with straw
the
poll.
motion's
I think-
good, it'll be a vote.
I'd like to get a vote, I think, on the motion. Nancy's not going to approve it. She's
Yep.
stated reasons, fine.
Yeah.
Because if it's not approved, then
It's not approved.
we move on to something else.
All right, we have a motion and a second. On that, I will call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye, no.
Motion carries.
I am a no.
Chairman, I'm going to take 2 minutes.
Yeah, can we have a?
Yes, we will
can
take a 5-minute break.
I have to be at the water utility at 5:30.
Into the meeting. Next on the agenda is
Yeah, he's not gonna take anything.
Sheridan Road Certified Survey Map CSM 25-2. Sam?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the CSM proposed splitting the existing parcel into two lots on the corner of Pratt Avenue and Sheridan Road in the Lake Park neighborhood. The application follows the land use element of the multi-jurisdictional comp plan. The village master bike plan recommends bicycle lane improvements for Sheridan Road, such as bicycle lanes. However, the applicant is not responsible for those improvements. Park and open space plan for the village of Mount Pleasant does not recommend anything for this property. From a fiscal impact, this is, currently kind of an underutilized property, so any improvements look better than what's out there now. But generally, an improvement value for this property is currently $2,800. The village staff estimated 4 units on the site. After talking to the applicant, they only plan 2, one single dwelling unit for each lot. But that really kind of scales proportionally with the value. So the general assumptions in the fiscal impact are still relatively similar. This performs currently better than the property and still meets our, general requirements for a fiscal impact analysis. It's also a corner lot, so it gets hammered with both streets and still does pretty well. So that's nice. On the actual survey itself, you can see this originally was 2 lots. They were slightly, just very slightly different. So we're actually returning it to the original plat back in the olden days. But with that, we recommend that the Plan Commission moves to recommend approval. A clean CSM. Yeah.
Any questions for Sam?
I got none. I got nothing.
You mean we can
Isn't
make,
this the one we already talked
you
about?
mean we can move?
That's,
Oh, north of there? Okay. I still don't have any questions.
They want to build a single-family home, but it had been zoned to be a multi-family corner, I think. And because of that zoning, the lot, they can't just put one house on 2 lots. And so they're splitting it.
there's no other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move to.
Well, I got a question, hold on. You just said it was zoned a single family?
No, it was zoned, it's zoned RM2.
Okay,
Which has a maximum lot size, like per unit.
okay.
So with the 2 lots together, you can't just put one house on them because that would be too big of a lot because it's supposed to be a denser thing. So they're splitting them, and when you do that, you can put a single family home on one of the lots.
Okay, so the designation for the zoning is not changing?
Nope.
Okay,
They're
that's,
just using
real
the-
quickly, I wanted to understand that. That's-
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think it goes to show, after a lot of recent conversation about zoning and flexibility and housing and all of that, this goes to show kind of when it is working in favor of someone who wants to use it, the zoning is flexible enough that they can divide it, create 2 dwelling units on the property without changing the zoning, which is nice.
Yes.
And this meets our definition of, this is moderate density, so you can have a single family home and have a moderate density neighborhood.
You-
Just like this neighborhood is all.
So you can have an RM, you can have a single family in an RM2?
Correct. There's just a maximum lot size, so we're kind of squeezing them up so people aren't able to do like a 200-foot lot in a moderate density zone.
Okay,
So that's, it requires, to do a unit, as Robin said, you got to shrink the lots or divide them like they are.
oh, I do have one more question.
Go for it.
The one of the lots on here that, I think it's lot, what we got, lot 2? It actually, the guy's porch on his deck to the west of him is on that property. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, he could remove it. We'll let them sort that one out. The whole neighborhood is rife with people not following lot lines to a T over time, so it's not uncommon. Typically, they'll either, deed some over just kind of between private property owners or, work with someone to relocate a deck. So we've seen it solved in a bunch of different ways, but yeah,
That's for them.
we're not touching that one.
No.
Well, but it's good, well, obviously, because his setback is gonna make a difference. That's, when he puts a building on there, he's
Yeah, so the rear setback is judged to the lot line, so, yeah, I mean, he's well within his rights to completely cut that neighbor's porch off their lot, but typically people find a way to work it out without resorting to that.
Yeah, okay.
Back in the day, we sold off quarter, third, and half lots in these subdivisions.
Mhm.
That's how we the line keeps down.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah.
They should really work that out before they record the CSM.
That's
other
their,
words, lot
that's their
two.
problem.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep. So on this one we're looking at here, and if there's no further discussion,
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion, don't we?
Oh, do we have a motion?
I think Trustee Bhatia started making a motion,
Oh,
but
Joe
Joe had a
had-
question.
No, not about it, but you have a question.
that's okay. Go ahead.
Chairman, I make a motion to recommend approval of CSM 25-2.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next, 8811 Campus Drive Site Plan Review SP 25-4.
It's like we're approving our own home edition. The Village of Mount Pleasant, that's us, applied for a new storage building behind the PD. The building will replace the current trash enclosure, which will move slightly further east. The staff would typically review a project this small. However, the state statutes require that Plan Commission review public buildings. So you get to review a storage building.
Where's the fiscal impact?
There is a fiscal impact. The village owns the property and it's tax exempt. So however, this is paid for by impact fees. So it's not coming at, general obligation debt or a cost to the general taxpayer.
Impact fees.
Yeah, the PD is using its impact fees for this one.
Keenly aware of that.
It also follows the land use element of the multi-jurisdictional comp plan. The park and open space plan shows a large wetland complex behind Village Hall, as you can see through the windows. But this application does not propose affecting any of those delineated wetlands. The application does not include the 36-inch high parapets required by the division, but I get to approve alternative compliance for things like this. The Village Hall site includes things like green infrastructure like bioswales and geothermal, does not cost the taxpayers additional funds, and preserves the wetlands identified in the park and open space plan. So I ruled it met the alternative compliance procedures. As a note to that, we have had a lot of issues with the roof height and design categories, so we will likely tag that for a future update, because it's been going to the Board of Appeals a lot. So just put a pin in that, and we'll talk to you about parapets and such in a coming meeting. With that, we also recommend approval.
Where was the landscape plan?
I want to know what landscape plan is, yes.
There is no landscape
Where's the
plan.
bike path?
Where's the dogs? Where's the dog walking path?
Why would this not
be a dumpster enclosure? Because dumpster's a registered trademark that everybody steals.
Oh, okay.
It was
Well,
dumpsters.
trash enclosure?
Trash enclosure's appropriate.
Why would we not require a landscape plan as far as the trees that we do for anything we do for like our parking lots we put in down on KR and Brown Road? We had to meet our requirements. so-
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The landscaping and screening that relates to trash enclosures, that enclosure does meet the requirements. They are given like a masonry wall option. We give ourselves a masonry wall option as we do developers. So if you have a full masonry wall enclosure, you don't need to add additional landscaping surrounding the trash
I'm
enclosure.
not talking about the trash enclosure, I'm talking about the new building.
Oh, because it's not a big enough change to kick in the requirements for the landscaping section for anything else.
It's also completely behind the building, so it wouldn't.
Well, it's got to be viewed by the Y, though, the YMCA. It's got to be in their vision.
The only thing that would need to be screened is the trash enclosure per the landscaping ordinance, and that, the trash enclosure does meet those standards.
Okay.
So I did double check it. That's a good question. Also, the Village Hall, when we added landscaping, probably at least 5 years ago, additional landscaping around the front and side, that was to meet our own landscaping code. So generally, the Village Hall parking lots do meet our own landscaping ordinance. This wasn't adding additional parking, so we didn't review the whole lot for compliance, but the village spent about 25 grand, like 5 years ago, to bring ourselves up to code for that.
like it or not?
Yeah.
I think we should lay it over and make him, let's do a traffic impact analysis, and then to Frank and Tom's point, where's the path, where's the, no. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Excellent. Robin, are you up for your deal, or you want to move it to another meeting?
I'm punting. One, because we just switched over our online servicer, so it's like kind of pointless to give you the data from stuff that's closed. So I should be able to get a much better product from BSNA
Perfect.
by the next one.
All right.
Yeah, my report is exactly that, the village community development, so us building inspection, the permits that go through Public Works. We're all switching to a new permitting system that was approved by the village board through last year's budget. That more closely intertwines with the village's financing system. So anyone who's looking to apply for a permit or asks you about it for your role as a plan commissioner, just know that we are like literally yesterday, today, and tomorrow in the process of turning that all on after about a week and a half of testing and months of prep beforehand. So shout out to Kathy Casper, our finance director, for kind of leading the charge in that, and then everyone else has been deeply involved in it too. But if you go to applications and permits, you'll see a little construction sign currently that should be turned on in the next couple days. And to Robin's point, the reports that we'll be able to generate, the data that we're able to collect on the front end should be a lot more detailed and something that you'll like to see. So good new permitting system. I'm sure there'll be bugs as we work through it, so if anyone complains to you, let us know, because there's a lot of customization options in this version, and we'd like to know if there are any complaints so we can try to address it. So just keep your ears to the ground and look forward to, if you want to build a new shed, that's where you'll end up going.
All right. Thank you. And I just want to thank you all for your
Yep.
patience with me on my public comment time period that I allow, probably more than most would, but
No, I think,
I appreciate your patience on that.
You got a lot to
we
say.
need that,
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And this is their chance to
Glad you caught,
to clear it for the board, get as much out so you have something to go on.
I appreciate your taking the one comment person to task on some of the more abrasive comments, because that was neither justified nor appreciated,
Right.
so.
He lives 364 feet away.
Yeah.
It's a purposely excluded.
Oh,
Okay.
and he's the guy on Providence too.
Yep.
That we so move to adjourn.
You?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Next meeting
Thank you
date
all.
is
Okay,
That recommendation.
yeah, so here, Joe.
No. 19th of March.